The slumbering galaxy hypothesis. In the vast canvas of the universe, galaxies burn with purpose. Billions of stars bound together, spinning, colliding, consuming, and creating. To us, they seem eternal, ageless, ever bright. But what if that isn't the case? What if galaxies themselves could sleep? This is the core of the slumbering galaxy hypothesis, a bold and mysterious idea that suggests entire galaxies can fall into a kind of cosmic hibernation, not unlike stars flickering out only to burst back into life. This hypothesis proposes that galaxies may enter a state of dormancy, where they dim, their stellar births slow to a crawl, and their brilliant arms fade into shadows for eons, only to awaken again, glowing with renewed fire. To understand this, we have to first look at what makes a galaxy active. Star formation is the heartbeat of any galaxy. When galaxies collide or when cold gas is abundant, massive stellar nurseries ignite, creating blue young stars that burn hot and fast. But over time, galaxies can run out of the cold gas necessary for star formation. Without new stars, the galaxy fades. Not dies, just dims. Astronomers have long observed galaxies called wet and dead, large elliptical galaxies that show little to no new star formation. They're filled with aging stars, cooling gas, and dust. But recent data from deep-field telescopes like Hubble and ALMA have revealed something stranger. Galaxies that appear to have stopped forming stars entirely for millions of years, only to later reignite in a sudden burst of galactic activity. This could suggest slumber. A sleeping galaxy isn't empty. It's dormant. Cold gas may still exist within its gravitational boundary, perhaps heated or stabilized in a way that halts collapse into stars. But this sleep isn't permanent. Interactions, minor mergers with dwarf galaxies, close gravitational encounters, or even the accumulation of new intergalactic gas can reignite the star formation cycle. We see hints of this in post-starburst galaxies. These are galaxies that recently formed massive numbers of stars, but then suddenly stopped, like a dying flame that unexpectedly flares back to life. Astronomers believe these might be transitional phases, snapshots of galaxies caught between deep sleep and reawakening. Consider Messier 82, also known as the Cigar Galaxy. It is undergoing a furious starburst right now, but just a few 100 million years ago, it was quiet. Now, with gravitational nudging from its neighbor M81, it's ablaze with newborn stars. Could this be what awakening looks like? Or take NGC 1277, a relic galaxy that formed all of its stars early in the universe and then stopped. For 10 billion years, it hasn't changed. But even it isn't entirely dead. It's just waiting for the right disruption, the right moment. Then there's the Andromeda Galaxy, our nearest large galactic neighbor. Studies suggest its star formation rate has declined over the last few billion years. Is it slowing down or beginning to sleep? And when it eventually merges with the Milky Way, will the collision jolt both galaxies back into fiery rebirth? The slumbering galaxy hypothesis challenges the way we view cosmic time. We often see galaxies as static, evolving slowly but always active. But if galaxies can truly hibernate, pause for a billion years, and then resume, then our models of galactic life cycles need revision. It introduces a level of cosmic behavior that's fluid and cyclical, not just linear. And then there's the deeper implication. What if our own galaxy, our Milky Way, is nearing one of these phases? Our star formation rate is modest, not dead, but not thriving either. Could we, one day, live under a sky that fades, where fewer stars are born, and the galaxy slowly dims, only to light up again long after we are gone? In a universe ruled by entropy, where everything tends toward decay, the idea of cosmic sleep isn't just poetic, it's hopeful. A sleeping galaxy is a galaxy that rests, it waits, it survives. So perhaps when we gaze into the dark stretches of space and see only shadows, what we're really looking at aren't dead galaxies, but dormant ones, slumbering giants, not extinguished flames. Their quiet is not an end, it's a breath, a pause, a whisper before the next cosmic exhale. And maybe, just maybe, somewhere out there, a galaxy is waking up right now. The consciousness migration theory. What if death was not the end, but simply a redirection? Imagine a version of you, the same memories, the same awareness, waking up in another timeline, another world, seconds after your final breath in this one, not as a ghost, not as a reincarnation, but as you. That is the foundation of the consciousness migration theory, a mind-bending idea that suggests consciousness is not tethered solely to the biology of our brains, but may, upon the body's death, detach and reattach across dimensions, like a signal tuning into a new frequency. This isn't reincarnation in the traditional spiritual sense, nor is it simple wishful thinking about an afterlife. It's rooted in quantum mechanics, multiverse theory, and the strange, haunting resilience of the human mind to persist in scenarios it shouldn't survive. Consciousness, as many philosophers and scientists are beginning to believe, may be less like a flame and more like a field, not something generated by the brain, but accessed by it. When the brain dies, the field doesn't vanish. It simply shifts, like a dream flickering into another scene. Consider this. Every moment you've ever experienced exists as a point in a probability cloud. 1,000 possible versions of you branch off with every decision, every coincidence, every near miss. Most of these versions are forever separate. But what if consciousness, your core self, doesn't always end when your current timeline does? What if it migrates sideways, sliding into a version of you in another universe? One where you didn't crash your car that night, or where the bullet missed, or the cancer scan came back clear. In some variations of quantum immortality, this theory is already explored. The concept suggests that from the internal, subjective perspective, you never die. Your consciousness continues to jump to realities in which you survive, even if those realities are increasingly unlikely. You may be in a universe where you should have died 10 times over, but you didn't. Because each time, the version of you that didn't survive ceased to house your awareness, while another version picked up where the story continued. Let's take an example. Imagine someone undergoing a fatal accident, a plane crash, for instance. In one reality, they perish instantly, but in another, a small change, a slightly faster heartbeat, a better seatbelt, a wing angle corrected by a gust of wind allows them to survive. According to the consciousness migration theory, your subjective self, the one living through this, won't experience death at all. You will feel yourself survive. In fact, you always will. No matter how dire the odds, your mind migrates to the survival branch of reality. Death, then, becomes something that happens to others from your perspective, never to you. But here's where it grows even stranger. What happens when the probabilities run out? When you've crossed so many timelines that the next survivable outcome is radically different. Not just a version of you with a scar, but a version of you in a completely different world, where history has bent differently, where the sky is a different shade, where the laws of physics are slightly skewed. Does your consciousness still leap? Does it have to leap? Some theorists propose that this migration isn't just passive. It might be guided by intention, memory, or emotion. That when we dream of distant places or feel déjà vu, we're catching echoes from the realities our consciousnesses have brushed up against, or even temporarily visited. The feeling that you've been here before, in a place you've never seen, or that you narrowly avoided danger without explanation. Perhaps those are subtle signs of migration, moments where you jumped timelines but kept the memory residue. And it doesn't stop with death defiance. What if extreme grief, trauma, or even meditative awareness can trigger these leaps? The Tibetan concept of the bardo, a state between life and death, speaks of consciousness moving fluidly between forms and realms. Could that be an ancient version of this theory? A map of consciousness slipping between possible selves? Of course, skeptics argue that this is nothing more than science fiction wrapped in existential hope, a refusal to accept mortality. But isn't it odd that consciousness, the very thing that lets you hear this now, is still the one thing science cannot truly explain? No one knows how subjective experience arises from neurons. No one knows why you are you and not someone else. The hard problem of consciousness remains unsolved. And that gap, that unquantifiable sliver of mystery, is the space where the consciousness migration theory thrives. It suggests that we are not just passengers in our brain, but travelers in a multidimensional network of realities. That our story doesn't end when the body does. It simply writes a new chapter in a different book. Think back to every near-death experience ever recorded. A tunnel, a light, a sense of floating, not up, but across. Some survivors report emerging from their body, observing the room, then awakening in a hospital bed days later. But what if they didn't wake up in the same timeline? What if their loved ones didn't notice a difference, but they crossed into a subtly altered world, where everything is familiar, yet somehow off? This idea isn't without precedent in other disciplines. In physics, entangled particles react to each other instantly across vast distances, suggesting that something, a field, a signal, a presence, might be operating outside conventional spacetime. In philosophy, thinkers like Schopenhauer and Jung pondered a shared unconscious or will, a unified field of awareness flowing through individuals like threads in a tapestry. The consciousness migration theory unites all of these. It says that consciousness is not bound to neurons. It is not annihilated by trauma. It is the tuning fork of existence, seeking resonance, continuity, and survival across every possible timeline. And in this view, death is not the opposite of life. It's the doorway to more of it, just elsewhere. So next time you blink, feel pain, or dream of falling endlessly only to awaken safely, ask yourself, what if your previous self didn't wake up? What if this version of you caught the signal and carried the story forward? You might never die in your own eyes. You may always survive. But the price of that persistence is waking up in stranger and stranger timelines, each one a little further from the one you knew. Consciousness, like light, may not stop. It simply changes direction, and maybe, just maybe, that's how you'll live forever. The sentient forest. Thought T. What if the trees we walk past every day aren't just passive life forms, but ancient minds, thinking in time frames so vast we mistake their silence for absence? The idea that forests may be sentient isn't just poetic metaphor or a spiritual notion, it's an emerging scientific curiosity. And if it's true, it could mean that right beneath our feet, entire conversations are taking place, drawn out over decades or even centuries. Imagine a conversation where one sentence takes 50 years to form, where a warning signal about a drought or disease spreads not through voice, but through an intricate web of fungal tendrils and chemical pulses. This isn't fantasy. Scientists have discovered that trees are connected by vast underground networks, dubbed the Wood Wide Web, where mycorrhizal fungi link roots from one tree to another, allowing them to share water, nutrients, and even biochemical distress signals. A mother tree, older and more deeply rooted, might feed her saplings. A tree under insect attack might warn its neighbors, prompting them to boost their defenses days before the threat reaches them. But if they can share warnings and sustenance, what else might they share? Some researchers believe trees can remember, not in the human sense, with images and language, but biologically, through patterns embedded in their cells, shaped by experience. A tree that lived through a fire might grow differently afterward, passing those traits or chemical warnings to its seedlings. It learns, it adapts, it remembers. We see this in epigenetics, where environmental factors switch genes on or off, and where these changes, these memory imprints, might span generations. Could this be the forest's way of preserving history? Now, imagine an ancient grove, tall, unyielding elders. Beneath the soil, their roots form a living archive. A fire from 300 years ago isn't forgotten. A flood from a century past still resonates. Trees born long after carry the echoes of their ancestors, and these echoes shape their responses, their growth, their behavior. If consciousness exists on a spectrum, and not as a binary switch, then the stillness of trees might not mean a lack of thought, but a pace of thought that we, frantic creatures of the hour and day, simply cannot perceive. This shifts our perspective entirely. What if the forest isn't a collection of individual trees, but a singular entity, one with countless limbs, roots, and senses, processing information over generations? From above, we see trunks, but from below they are joined in a silent chorus of slow deliberation. One might even imagine the forest dreaming, not in color or narrative like humans do, but in changes of soil acidity, in wind patterns recorded in bark, in the way leaves lean toward the sun after long winters. Each adaptation, each change, a line in the forest's language. In the Amazon rainforest, scientists have noticed strange behaviors, trees growing together in coordinated ways that can't be explained by sunlight or terrain alone. In Japan, cedar groves planted centuries ago seem to adapt in unison, even across great distances. And in old-growth forests across Europe, Tree rings have shown responses to events they couldn't have witnessed directly, suggesting signals were sent from distant relatives. These aren't just anecdotes. They are fragments of a larger story we're only beginning to understand. And if these ancient green minds are thinking, remembering, and communicating, then we must ask, what do they make of us? We bulldoze their kin, poison their soils, cut through their networks like stabbing neurons in a living brain. Yet some trees still reach toward us, bend gently over trails, drop seeds near our windows. Have we considered that their quiet patience might not be passivity, but tolerance? That their apparent stillness might mask a kind of wisdom we've never known? Consider the redwoods, some over 2,000 years old. They were alive before our ancestors knew electricity, before the rise and fall of entire civilizations. A redwood may have witnessed the rise of Rome, the silence of the plague, the scream of chainsaws, and still, it stands, unmoving, watching, adapting. Could such longevity grant it a different form of awareness? This theory, while not yet mainstream science, is no longer dismissed outright. Researchers are developing ways to measure plant responses not just chemically, but electrically. Plants emit weak bioelectric signals, pulses akin to those in our own nervous systems. Could these signals form a code, a syntax of sensation? Some believe it's possible, others call it pseudoscience. But even those who doubt the notion of tree sentience admit the behavior of forests is far more complex than we once believed. So, let's return to the thought, a sentient forest. Picture yourself walking through one. The silence isn't empty. It's listening. The air carries not just oxygen, but unseen messages, sense of threat, pheromones of hope, hormonal hints of health or decay. You step near a birch, and somewhere deeper in the woods, a root twitches. Not in fear, but recognition. The forest catalogs you, remembers your scent, your tread, your effect on the soil. Over decades, your footsteps become part of its memory. Perhaps the trees closest to the path begin to lean differently. Their leaves widen in summer. Their roots withdraw just slightly. Small signs, imperceptible in a lifetime, but over a century, they may shape the entire forest. We think we leave no mark when we walk through nature. But if the forest thinks, then everything we do is recorded in its living mind. This raises ethical questions. If forests are sentient, even in a way fundamentally alien to us, what responsibility do we carry? We do not burn libraries without guilt. Yet every forest is a living library of decisions, reactions, and silent songs spanning millennia. We must reconsider how we interact with them. Logging, urban sprawl, deforestation, each becomes not just destruction, but erasure, a severing of thought, a forced amnesia on a species that might be remembering things we cannot. And what if, just what if, the Earth has always relied on the forest as a kind of slow planetary consciousness, a regulating system that speaks in centuries, that balances carbon, nurtures weather, monitors the pulse of life, and responds with the gravity of ages? Perhaps we are merely the quick-moving neurons, the immediate impulse, but the forest, it is the wisdom, the record, the slow breath of Earth itself. In our quest for faster thoughts and louder voices, we have overlooked the ones who whisper beneath the soil. But the more we listen, the more we find that sentience may not be defined by speed, language, or mirrors, but by connection, persistence, and memory that spans lifetimes. The forest may not shout, but it remembers, and it waits. We must decide whether we continue to walk past these ancient minds, or finally acknowledge the quiet intelligence that has stood for thousands of years, holding secrets in root and ring, waiting for us to hear the voice beneath the leaves. The echo frame concept. Imagine watching your life unfold like a film, frame by frame. Every action, every decision, every heartbeat, neatly aligned in a timeline you perceive as real. But what if the reality you know is not the original cut, but merely an echo, a single frame behind your true timeline? This is the echo frame concept, a theory not of parallel universes, but of delayed alignment, where consciousness, somehow, is out of phase with the reality it was meant to inhabit. It's not a glitch. It's not déjà vu. It's something far more subtle, and perhaps far more terrifying. According to proponents of the echo frame concept, our consciousness might not be experiencing reality in real time. Instead, we could be perceiving the ghost of it, a version delayed by the smallest imaginable sliver, not seconds, not milliseconds, but one frame, just enough to introduce a ripple, just enough to disconnect you from where and who you were truly meant to be. To understand this concept, consider how film works. A movie is just a series of still images, frames, flashed quickly in succession. At 24 frames per second, your brain stitches them together into fluid motion. Now imagine if your brain were watching a different reel, one that's been duplicated but shifted slightly out of sync. You're still seeing the story, still living it, but you're no longer on the original track. You're on an echo. What makes this so unsettling is that you'd never know. To your senses, everything feels right. Gravity pulls, your heart beats, you speak and are heard. But beneath that normalcy, something doesn't fit. A persistent wrongness. The sense that you're always just a step behind your own shadow. That the present doesn't quite belong to you. That your true choices, your true thoughts, are happening in a timeline just ahead, and you're merely the ghost left behind. This isn't just metaphysical speculation. In neuroscience, there's a concept called perceptual latency. It takes time, albeit milliseconds, for your brain to process the world. When you see lightning and then hear thunder, that delay feels natural, but within your mind, there's always delay. Your consciousness lags slightly behind the physical world. It's been proven that your brain makes decisions a fraction of a second before you become aware of them. So what if that fraction isn't just delay, but displacement? Let's say you're walking through your house and suddenly feel you've already taken that exact step before. That hallway? Familiar. That flickering bulb? Expected. But not remembered. It's not déjà vu. It's synchronization drift. The moment was already lived by your true self, the one frame ahead. You're catching up. And the eeriness comes not from the repetition, but from the echo finally reaching your ears. Now, imagine the implications. If you're living one frame behind, your instincts might be echoes of choices already made. When you feel hesitation, it could be your displaced consciousness brushing against a decision your true self already chose. That gut feeling not to trust someone, maybe your real self already did, and paid the price. Some researchers in theoretical physics have explored concepts like temporal stacking and quantum echo fields, where time might ripple outward from decisions made at quantum levels. If consciousness is entangled with such phenomena, then what you experience could literally be a reverberation, not a reflection, of true moments occurring in alternate threads of reality, or possibly a head in your own. There are moments in life we can't explain, times we feel like we're drifting, like we're spectators in our own story. Have you ever said something and instantly felt like it wasn't you speaking? Have you ever walked into a room and forgotten why you entered, only to feel, inexplicably, like a version of you already did what you came for? That might be your consciousness slipping into phase alignment with the frame ahead. Or it might be the echo failing to catch up. The echo frame concept also casts new light on mental phenomena like intrusive thoughts, lucid dreams, or split-second visions of impossible outcomes. If alternate frames are bleeding into your own, then what you're perceiving might not be hallucination, but crossover noise from adjacent timelines. You're not imagining a different reality. You're glimpsing it. Let's take a hypothetical example. Imagine a man named Aaron. He works a stable job, lives in a quiet suburb, and has never taken risks. But every night, he dreams of being in a city he's never visited, talking to people he's never met. And yet, it all feels right. Over time, he starts feeling disconnected from his actual life. Colors feel muted. Words come out strangely. And sometimes, when he's alone, he hears someone whisper his name in his own voice, just slightly off. Not a ghost, not madness, but perhaps Aaron's consciousness is echoing from a timeline where he did move to that city, where he lived that life, where that version of him exists just one frame ahead, and his current self is only a residual afterimage. This theory doesn't claim you're stuck forever. In fact, some believe we can realign ourselves to our original frames, through meditation, through lucid dreaming, through deep self-reflection, maybe even through moments of crisis when our sense of self is cracked open. Have you ever experienced a sudden moment of clarity where everything clicked, like you were finally awake in your own life? That could be the moment your consciousness snapped forward, rejoined its proper timeline. You became you again. But how many of us are still behind? This also ties deeply into the existential question. What is identity if you are not living in the timeline your soul was meant for? Are you the choices you make, or the echoes of choices your other self already made? If two versions of you exist, one leading and one lagging, are you still whole, or are you the residue of a mind that's perpetually out of sync? Think about the idea that every major decision you've ever made could be the result of a shadow decision from a frame just ahead. That love you lost, maybe your other self didn't. That job you didn't take, maybe the alternate version of you took it. And now your dreams whisper from that timeline, mocking your hesitation. The echo frame concept is a haunting lens through which to view reality. It doesn't require alternate universes, just misaligned perception. It tells us that life might not be flawed, but out of sync, that we might not be broken, just displaced. And in that displacement lies a quiet horror, the idea that someone else, almost you, is living the life meant for you, just one frame away. You may never know if you're truly living your life, or only experiencing its delayed reflection. But sometimes, just sometimes, when the world feels a little too quiet, or too loud, or too perfect to be real, ask yourself, whose life am I really living? And can I ever catch up to the frame ahead? Or am I destined to forever echo behind a version of myself I'll never meet, but always feel? The forgotten choice effect. What if the path you're on right now, the people in your life, the job you have, the city you live in, all of it, traces back to a choice you made but no longer remember? What if your entire existence is the echo of a forgotten decision, buried so deeply in your memory that it feels like it never happened? This is the forgotten choice effect. The idea that the most defining moment of your life may not be the big, dramatic choices you recall, but a quiet, overlooked decision that set everything in motion. Imagine standing in a train station. You're looking at two departure boards, both glowing with possible destinations. You hesitate. One train is leaving in 5 minutes, the other leaves in 10. In a rush, you choose the earlier one. No big deal. But on that train, you meet someone. They introduce you to someone else. That person becomes a mentor. That mentor connects you to a job. That job becomes your career. That career becomes your life. All because you picked the 5-minute train instead of the 10. It felt like nothing in the moment, but that choice became everything. This is the essence of the forgotten choice effect. It's not the choices you remember that shape you most. It's the ones you forget making. These decisions slip past conscious memory because they don't feel significant when they happen. They're mundane, everyday crossroads. Where to sit in a classroom, whether to attend a last-minute event, what street to walk down on a rainy afternoon. But later, those trivial moments cascade into seismic shifts. Psychologists call this phenomenon choice blindness. In one famous study, researchers asked participants to choose between two faces based on attractiveness. After making their selection, the researchers secretly swapped the photos and handed the participants the opposite one, asking them to explain their choice. Incredibly, most didn't notice the switch. They justified a decision they didn't actually make. This suggests our brains aren't wired to track every decision with precision. Sometimes we forget what we chose, or misremember it entirely, and yet we still build coherent stories around those forgotten or misremembered moments. Apply that to your life. Think about the thousands of decisions you've made, day after day. Most of them blur together, but maybe one tiny, seemingly irrelevant choice was the hinge on which your current reality turned. You just don't remember it. Let's go deeper. Have you ever thought back on your life and wondered, how did I get here? You can trace some things. I studied engineering because I liked physics. I met her through a mutual friend. I moved to this city for a job. But keep tracing those decisions back. Why did you go to that school? Why did you speak to that friend that day? Why did you choose that class? Eventually, you reach a point where the trail fades, a moment you can't explain, a forgotten choice, and yet, without it, none of the rest would exist. Now imagine there was a version of you that made a different choice in that forgotten moment. Maybe you took the other train, sat in the other chair, clicked on a different link. That version of you spiraled off into a life entirely unlike your own. Not better or worse, just different. That version may be living in another city, married to someone else, working a different job, believing different things, and they may be wondering how they ended up where they are, just like you. This brings us to the philosophical weight of the forgotten choice effect. Because if we can't remember the decisions that shape us most, then how much control do we really have? Are we steering our lives, or being quietly steered by invisible threads of forgotten moments? The ancient Stoics believed that fate governs more than we realize, that our control is limited, and wisdom lies in accepting what we can't control. In a way, the forgotten choice effect affirms that belief. We like to think we're rational agents, consciously directing the trajectory of our lives. But if some of the most important pivots happen without our awareness or beyond our memory, then free will starts to feel like a story we tell ourselves to make sense of the chaos. And yet, there's something beautiful in this chaos. Think about it. Your life is a tapestry woven not only from deliberate intentions, but also from random encounters, minor decisions, and unconscious nudges. You are the product of both will and accident, both memory and amnesia. Let's bring it back to something tangible. Picture a high school student, tired, anxious, burnt out. He has to choose between attending an optional club or going straight home. He flips a coin, he goes to the club. There he meets someone who inspires him. Years later, they co-found a company together. The company changes their lives, all because of a coin flip he doesn't even remember making. Or a woman rushing through an airport. She sees two food options. One line is longer than the other. She picks the shorter line. In that line, she chats with someone. They date. They marry. They have kids. She looks back later and says, "It must have been fate." But maybe it wasn't fate. Maybe it was a forgotten choice, the line she stood in. A choice too small to feel meaningful, but it changed everything. This is the haunting beauty of life. You'll never fully know which moments mattered most. You'll never be able to reverse engineer every turn that led you here. But maybe that's not the point. Maybe the forgotten choice effect isn't meant to make you paranoid about every decision. Maybe it's a reminder to be present, to honor the now. Because any moment, no matter how ordinary, could echo for decades. The small choices you make today may be the defining ones of your future. You just won't know it until long after they've passed, if at all. So ask yourself, what decisions are you making without thought? What chances are you ignoring because they seem too small to matter? What paths are you not even aware you're walking? Because one day, you'll look around at your life and realize that the biggest choice you ever made was one you forgot the moment it happened. And that reality, strange and humbling as it is, might be the truest thing about being human. The forgotten choice effect isn't just a theory. It's a lens, a way to look at your life, your past, and your future. It's a gentle invitation to live a little more consciously, and a whisper in the background of your mind, reminding you that today's tiniest decision could rewrite everything. The soul frequency theory. What if every soul vibrates at a frequency all its own? Not metaphorically, not spiritually, but energetically. What if we aren't just flesh and thought, but finely tuned instruments, each radiating a signature tone into the invisible spectrum of reality? This is the heart of the soul frequency theory, the idea that every human being emits a unique energetic frequency, like a song only the universe can hear. And when two people fall in love, or when you get that overwhelming sense of déjà vu, or even when your gut tells you something is off, what if those moments are simply frequency syncing? Energetic resonance between two or more soul signatures aligning for a brief, intense moment. It's easy to write this off as poetic, but the science of resonance is very real. Every atom vibrates, every molecule oscillates. Even our brain waves, our thoughts, can be measured in hertz. Gamma, beta, alpha, theta, delta. Each wave state reflects how we think, feel, and process. Our hearts emit electromagnetic fields. Our neurons fire in rhythms. We are energy. We are vibration. And yet, so much of what we experience lies beyond numbers. Have you ever met someone and instantly felt calm, as if their presence muted your anxiety, or felt unsettled around someone who hadn't said a word? That's frequency at work. Not chemical, not logic, just invisible resonance or dissonance. According to the soul frequency theory, every person's soul emits a subtle energetic field shaped by their emotions, experiences, trauma, desires, and thoughts. It's like a fingerprint, but vibrational. And when two people's frequencies complement each other, they resonate, like tuning forks humming in sync across a silent room. This could explain love at first sight, Two frequencies suddenly syncing so tightly that time slows and everything feels right. It's not magic. It's not fate. It's resonance. It's why we feel drawn to some people, even without understanding why. Or why some breakups feel like a physical tear, because the resonance is being ripped away. And what about déjà vu? That eerie, fleeting sense that you've lived a moment before. The theory suggests that déjà vu might be your frequency brushing up against a field it once resonated with, a location, a thought, or even a person whose frequency echoes something long forgotten, maybe even from a previous life. Memory may not be the only mechanism for recognition. Frequency might be just as powerful. Intuition, too, is part of this equation. The soul frequency theory argues that intuition is not a sixth sense, but a sensitivity to vibrational shifts. People with strong intuition aren't psychic. They're just deeply attuned. They can feel dissonance before it becomes danger, or resonance before it becomes love. Their inner antenna is sensitive to the invisible music the rest of us ignore. We already use language that hints at this truth. We say, that vibe was off, or I'm picking up on something. We talk about bad energy or great chemistry without ever thinking about what it really means. But maybe all of it, love, hate, trust, instinct, is frequency, plain and simple. Now imagine that each life we live leaves an imprint on our frequency. Trauma tightens it. Joy expands it. Experiences fine-tune it. And over time, our soul becomes more complex, more rich, more resonant. Maybe that's what growth really is. Frequency evolving. There's even a possibility that places retain frequencies too. Have you ever walked into a room and felt something heavy or peaceful without explanation? Churches, battlefields, bedrooms, spaces carry echoes of the energy released within them. This is frequency residue. It might explain hauntings, sacred places, or why some homes just don't feel right, even when nothing bad has ever happened there. The walls hum with past frequencies. So, what does this all mean? If the soul frequency theory is true, it could change how we view relationships, emotions, even mental health. Therapy wouldn't just be about talking. It could involve tuning the frequency. Music, breathwork, meditation, tools that adjust and restore vibrational harmony. Love wouldn't just be a feeling, but a vibrational alignment. And hate, a violent dissonance that shatters resonance until we can no longer stand to be near each other. Some people will say it's nonsense, that it's all just metaphor and feeling. But even in science, the smallest building blocks of reality, quarks, electrons, photons, are waves. They pulse, they move, they carry frequency. So maybe, just maybe, our souls do too. And maybe, when the right person walks into your life and your chest tightens and your skin buzzes and your mind goes quiet, it's not fate, it's not luck. It's the frequency of your soul finally finding a note it's been waiting to hear for lifetimes. That isn't poetry, that's resonance. And maybe, somewhere out there, someone is humming your exact note right now, waiting to sync, to collide, and to sing the same silent song only your soul will recognize. The fogged horizon. Thought. What if the future isn't fixed, not even slightly shaped, not even softly outlined, but instead, constantly under construction, reassembling itself moment by moment as we live and breathe? That's the unsettling essence of the fogged horizon thought. The idea that the future doesn't actually exist ahead of us, waiting to be discovered, but is instead dynamically rewriting itself, frame by frame, as if the universe is still calculating what comes next. What we think of as the future might only be a temporary sketch, a blurry placeholder, while something deeper and more complex is still being written in the background. Imagine walking through a dense fog where you can only see a few feet in front of you. The path ahead doesn't reveal itself until you take another step. And behind you, the road vanishes again, swallowed by the same mist. You think you're heading toward a fixed destination. College, marriage, retirement, whatever goals you've planted in your mind. But what if the very fabric of reality is updating itself based on your actions, your choices, your mindset, and even your indecision? This isn't just philosophical speculation. It resonates with strange parallels in quantum physics, chaos theory, and even computational models of the universe. In quantum mechanics, we already know that particles exist in probabilistic states. They don't settle into a specific outcome until they are observed. This applies not just to atoms, but to systems, events, and potentially even time itself. Some physicists have speculated that the flow of time could be emergent, a result of how the universe computes information, not a pre-existing stream we're floating through. If that's the case, then the future is not a river flowing toward us, but a fog, a space of unrendered probability waiting for an input to snap it into shape. Think of a video game rendering engine. The world only fully renders what the player sees. Everything else exists in a kind of potential form, ready to take shape, but not fully realized. What if reality works the same way? What if the reason we can't predict the future, even with all our intelligence, models, and statistics, is because the future hasn't been fully calculated yet? Here's an example. Imagine two people, identical in every measurable way. Same background, same resources, same opportunities. But one believes their future is clear and locked in, while the other believes it's fluid and still forming. Over time, the first may unknowingly steer toward the expected, repeating patterns, reinforcing the past. But the second? They may begin noticing the fog parting in strange directions. New paths open up, not because the world changed, but because their belief allowed more rendering room. The future they walked into wasn't just observed, it was built beneath their feet, reacting to the signals they gave. The fogged horizon thought suggests that your expectations, your intent, even your emotional states, fear, hope, apathy, might subtly shape the contours of what gets computed next. Not through magic, not through manifestation cliches, but through something deeper. The universe as a dynamic system that factors you into its unfolding equation. This idea becomes even more intense when you factor in chaos theory, the notion that small initial changes can lead to vastly different outcomes. Like the flap of a butterfly's wings creating a distant storm, your seemingly minor decision, taking a walk instead of staying home, making that awkward phone call, changing your tone during a conversation, could create a ripple that shifts the entire structure of what lies ahead. And since the future is still calculating, it's sensitive to those ripples in real time. We often ask, what's my purpose? What's meant to happen? But this thought reframes the question. It implies that nothing is meant to happen until you get close enough for the fog to clear. Purpose isn't discovered, it's generated. The horizon doesn't deliver fate. It responds to presence. Let's take another example. Artificial intelligence systems trained to predict outcomes. The deeper and more complex the model, the harder it is to forecast long-term effects, because each output depends not just on data, but on interaction, on what users do next, on what new inputs enter the system. If the universe is a kind of living computation, then it may work similarly. The output of tomorrow is based on the interactive, collaborative, sometimes chaotic feedback of today. The universe, like a feedback loop, refines its projection of the future as we act and exist within it. Now, stretch that further. Imagine millions, billions of conscious agents, all interacting, making micro-decisions every second. The future, then, isn't just a path unfolding. It's a battlefield of shifting probabilities, a constantly mutating equation reacting to everything. From gravitational waves across galaxies to the chemical storms inside your brain. Dreams, hopes, fears, maybe those are more than emotional noise. Maybe they are inputs, signals sent into the fog. The more consistent, the more focused, the more intentional those signals are, the more likely the fog will begin coalescing into a shape you can recognize. Not because the universe gives you what you want, but because you become a signal strong enough to influence what gets calculated next. There's something deeply unsettling and beautiful about this idea. It means you are not walking a pre-written story. It also means there are no guarantees, no promised lands, no final destinations etched into cosmic stone. But it also means you are a part of the authorship. The future is less a book and more a pen in your hand. The horizon is fogged not because the truth is hidden, but because the truth hasn't been decided yet. And maybe that's the point. Maybe life is not about finding out what happens next, but shaping what could happen next. Maybe the reason the horizon is always blurry is because clarity only comes when you walk toward it, not when you wait for it to reveal itself. The scariest part? There's no undo button. Once you step forward, the world behind you begins to erase, like mist swallowing your footprints. This isn't about regret. It's about responsibility. The universe doesn't wait. It adapts. It morphs with you. And every breath you take is a calculation in progress. So, next time you wonder why the future feels uncertain, remember, it's not failing to show you something. It's waiting for your input. It's not a blank space hiding secrets. It's an evolving equation scanning your behavior, your belief, your rhythm, and somewhere in the fog, reality waits to be rendered. Not tomorrow, not someday, but the moment you choose to step forward. The alien dream leak. What if your strangest dreams, those fleeting flashes of alien skies, languages you've never learned, or beings with too many eyes and not enough faces, weren't figments of your imagination, but borrowed moments from another mind entirely? A dream where the ground breathes, where light has weight, where you are not you. Could these be fragments not of your subconscious, but of something else streaming through you? Welcome to the alien dream leak theory, a haunting, exhilarating possibility that our most unexplainable dreams may not be our own. We often dismiss dreams as chaotic noise, the brain's way of filing away the day's chaos, or rearranging memories in strange, symbolic ways. And yet, some dreams don't feel like that. Some feel like invasions. You wake up with a vivid memory of a world that shouldn't exist, a geometry that defies Earth's rules, sensations no language can capture. Maybe it's a city made entirely of sound, or an emotion that takes physical form. Maybe you wake up trembling, unable to shake the sense that what you just experienced was real. Not metaphorically real, but somewhere, somewhen, real. Now imagine this. Consciousness is not a closed system. What if it leaks? Across vast stretches of space-time, across quantum entanglements and frequency harmonics we don't yet understand. What if thoughts are not as isolated as we think? We know particles can influence each other across unimaginable distances. Quantum entanglement proves that. So what if minds, built from those same particles, can also resonate beyond their boundaries? What if the dreams you have, those bizarre, incomprehensible ones, are echoes from an alien consciousness trying to understand you, or simply bleeding into you by accident? Think of dreams as a form of soft broadcasting. You're asleep, your brainwaves slow, your ego relaxed. The firewall of identity flickers. You become more receptive. If an alien species evolved to project thoughts rather than speak them, if their idea of communication is psychic or quantum in nature, then maybe they're out there, dreaming too. But unlike us, their dreams might travel. We don't notice these leakages because they don't come through as neat messages. They arrive wrapped in metaphor, distorted by the machinery of our own minds. A human brain cannot process the raw psyche of something that evolved in methane clouds or bioluminescent oceans. So it translates. It creates symbols. An alien's distress signal becomes a house on fire in your dream. A memory of their mating ritual becomes your recurring dream of being chased, of transformation, of falling. Their philosophical arguments manifest as dreams, where gravity reverses or where you have to speak by thinking in color. You think your subconscious made it up. But what if it's just a filter? Let's dig deeper. Throughout history, humans have documented bizarre dreams that transcend culture, language, or era, shamanic visions, sleep paralysis entities, prophetic nightmares, all eerily consistent across people who've never met or shared ideas. Some describe seeing creatures with tall, elongated skulls. Others mention hovering cities, beings made of sound, oceans that reflect not light, but memory. These aren't modern sci-fi imports. Indigenous cultures, isolated tribes, and even ancient Mesopotamian tablets echo these forms. Carl Jung called them archetypes, collective symbols from the shared unconscious. But what if those weren't collective human experiences, but signals shared between species, across the universe's dark fabric? Maybe what Jung interpreted as deep human psychology was actually us brushing against an alien mental current that's always been there. Imagine a distant civilization, millions of years older than us. They've evolved past physical communication. They no longer speak, write, or gesture. They dream together, in sync, like a shared network of consciousness. To them, dreaming is life, memory, intention, history, all encoded in dreamlike waves. But when they scan the stars for signs of other life, they don't send radio waves. they dream outward, hoping something, somewhere, might tune in. And somewhere, we do. But because we are primitive to them, sleeping in disconnected individual cocoons, we receive only fragments, broken pieces of their symphony, distorted by our biology. And so, we call it surrealism. Nonsense. But it keeps happening. Unexplained dreams that carry the weight of another existence. You've felt them. The dreams that linger too long, that seem to bleed into your waking hours, that leave behind questions instead of answers. There are even accounts of people dreaming of symbols and equations far beyond their knowledge. Children drawing stars in languages they've never seen. People waking with words on their tongues that don't belong to any known tongue, yet repeat across cultures. Researchers have dismissed these as coincidences, but the repetition is eerie. Patterns emerge, a strange script, a humming sound, a sense of being observed, but not judged. And here's where it gets even more unnerving. If alien consciousness can leak into ours, what happens when ours leaks into theirs? What if some of our thoughts, our nightmares, our darkest fears are leaking into the dreams of another species, terrifying them with the concept of individuality, war, or death? They might dream of us as monsters. Maybe they wake up, shivering, unable to comprehend what it's like to be alone inside a mind, disconnected, dreaming without a shared net to fall into. Perhaps humanity is the strange, incomprehensible force haunting their subconscious. There are already efforts underway to study this. Institutes exploring dream telepathy, lucid dream communication, and shared dreaming phenomena. The Global Consciousness Project, which studies fluctuations in random number generators around the world, has shown strange anomalies during major global events, suggesting a kind of connected awareness among us. But what if that awareness isn't just human? What if when you sleep, you're not alone? What if your dreams are part of a cosmic crossroads where minds accidentally brush against one another, sharing pain, joy, or questions without ever knowing the source? This is the mystery of the alien dream leak. Not a theory of invasion, but of resonance. A universe where minds, no matter how different, leave fingerprints on each other, where the weirdest dreams are the most honest ones, not random, but received. So, the next time you wake up sweating, haunted by the image of a spiral sun in a green sky, or a language made of glowing stones, ask yourself, was that really a dream? Or was it someone, somewhere, reaching across the vast dark, whispering not with words, but with dreams, hoping you'd listen, even if you don't understand? Because maybe, just maybe, you're not the only one dreaming. And maybe you've never dreamed alone. The carousel of lives concept. Close your eyes. Picture your life not as a straight line, not as a singular unfolding story, but as a carousel, a vast, ever-spinning mechanism. Except it doesn't carry painted horses and carnival music. No, it carries lives, thousands of them, versions of you scattered across possibilities. Some you'll never touch, some you'll only glimpse, and some bleed into yours in flashes that feel like déjà vu, sudden dread, unexplained euphoria, or dreams that shake your soul awake. This is the carousel of lives concept, and it doesn't suggest that you're just one version of yourself in one reality. It implies that you are all of them, and the version you perceive, the one watching this video, breathing in this very moment, is just the life currently at the front of the carousel, the one in focus. But just behind it, spinning around the edge, are the rest, waiting, watching, leaking through. Have you ever paused mid-conversation and felt you already said those exact words? Or dreamed a scenario so vivid it felt like a memory instead of fantasy? Those aren't glitches. They're echoes, glimpses, the carousel turning, your consciousness catching a flash of another life as it spins by. Let's dive deeper. According to this concept, consciousness is not anchored to a singular reality. Instead, it loops through countless versions of you, each living out its own trajectory based on choices, random events, and inexplicable circumstances. But instead of staying neatly in their lanes, these lives overlap, and not randomly. No, they touch when emotional resonance is highest, during trauma, longing, joy, or near-death experiences. Moments where the veil between lives thins, and you see another you. Not metaphorically, not symbolically, literally. Say you're walking down a street and a smell, a sound, or a flash of light brings tears to your eyes for no known reason. In that instant, Maybe the version of you on the carousel just beside your own has lost someone, and the wave hits you like a memory, but it isn't your memory, it's borrowed pain, or maybe it's joy. Maybe you're sitting at work and suddenly feel fulfilled, confident, like everything makes sense, only to have it vanish seconds later. That could be your carousel self, one step ahead, who found purpose in a life choice you never made. The feeling reached you like sunlight through a gap in a spinning wall. This theory reframes how we understand dreams. What if dreams aren't the mind processing the day's events, but windows to adjacent lives? In sleep, our consciousness detaches from the dominant carousel life and floats briefly among the others. That would explain why some dreams feel so right, why some dream versions of you have people, skills, jobs, or relationships that feel like they should be yours, even though they never were. Take the story of Lily, a painter who lost her ability to create after a traumatic car accident. In therapy, she began to describe recurring dreams where she was a teacher in a coastal town, painting sunsets with children. Over time, the dreams became clearer, more coherent. The town developed structure, the children had names, and her emotions deepened. It wasn't escapism. It was as if she was living that life somewhere else. Eventually, during one dream, she remembered the car accident, but in reverse. She saw herself avoiding it. That life, her carousel counterpart, never stopped painting. That life was one spin away, visible only in fragments, but deeply felt. The dreams weren't fiction. They were bleed-throughs. Scientists are beginning to flirt with ideas adjacent to this concept too. The many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics suggests that every possible outcome of every decision actually does occur, creating infinite branches of reality. But those branches aren't sealed off. What if consciousness is the one thing that isn't confined? What if your soul loops, travels, brushes across these branches? Not chronologically, but emotionally, like a carousel rotating through time and potential. This also gives us a chilling perspective on anxiety, or on depression, or irrational fears. What if you're not reacting to your current life, but absorbing the echoes of others? A fear of drowning when you've never been near deep water. A phobia of fire without a single traumatic incident. What if a version of you did drown? What if one was consumed by flame, and their final emotional signature pulses across the carousel, reaching you like a whispered warning? It's not superstition, it's resonance. And once you begin to notice it, you can't unsee it. You'll find yourself asking, why did that place feel like home? Why did that stranger seem familiar? Why do I mourn a life I've never lived? Because maybe you did live it, just not here, not in this spin. But it's still yours. The Carousel of Lives concept doesn't only dwell in tragedy or surreal wonder. It opens new doors to empathy and understanding. If you're carrying the emotional signature of other lives, then so is everyone else. That woman in the cafe who flinched at thunder, maybe her other self is living through a war. That man who cries during a children's cartoon, maybe his alternate self never had children and regrets it every night. We're all spinning, all connected, all haunted and enriched by the carousel's passing lights. It also suggests that intuition might be far more than instinct. That gut feeling not to trust someone, maybe your other self did and paid the price. That urge to take a different job, move cities, call someone out of the blue. It could be your carousel self urging you forward, pulling you toward a path they couldn't take. There's one final implication. Perhaps the carousel doesn't spin forever. Maybe there's a convergence point, a moment when all your lives begin aligning, not by accident, but by your choices. Each action you take that aligns with your truest self might draw the carousel inward, fusing lives into one radiant center. What some might call enlightenment, what others might call wholeness, and perhaps what we know as reincarnation, déjà vu, prophetic dreams, or even sudden awakenings are just flashes of that coming convergence. We are not single beings living single lives. We are multifaceted souls riding a rotating storm of experience, each version of us a note in a complex chord, sometimes discordant, sometimes harmonizing beautifully. You've felt it, haven't you? That deep ache when looking at a photo from a place you've never been, that flicker of knowing when meeting someone for the first time, that moment you pause in your life and whisper, "This isn't how it's supposed to be." Maybe it wasn't. Maybe you're on a different horse now, further along the carousel, watching your ideal life vanish in the rearview mirror. Or maybe just maybe, it's on its way back around. The question isn't whether you've lived other lives. The question is, can you listen closely enough to hear the carousel turning? And will you be ready when the next life comes around? The breathing reality hypothesis. What if time isn't a straight line, but something that breathes, something alive, expanding and contracting in rhythms we've barely begun to notice? We've always assumed that time flows like a river, in one direction, forward, predictable, measurable, and linear. But what if that assumption is wrong? What if time pulses, like a heartbeat, like breath? Imagine this. You're walking through your day, and everything feels slightly off. Not dramatically, but subtly. A conversation lingers longer than it should. A sound echoes strangely, a thought you had repeats itself. These aren't glitches. These are ripples. Evidence that you're living within a temporal rhythm, one that breathes in and out, syncing your perception to something vast and unseen. The breathing reality hypothesis proposes that time isn't a constant flow, but a series of pulses, like the inhalation and exhalation of the cosmos itself. The universe breathes, not in air, but in moments. Time stretches wide when it inhales. Seconds become minutes, possibilities bloom. And then, it exhales, pulling moments tight, compressing possibilities into choices, into irreversible paths. This idea is more than poetic speculation. There are subtle clues. Einstein told us time is relative. It moves slower near massive objects. Gravity can stretch time. That's not metaphor. That's physics. Time dilation is real. So is quantum uncertainty. We already know that reality isn't fixed. It flickers. Now, imagine that flicker sinking to a universal breath. Every expansion allows room for potential realities, forks in the road. Every contraction forces decisions, collapsing probabilities into the now. Have you ever felt time slow during danger, during a car crash, a fight, or just before impact? Scientists call it the brain's heightened perception, but maybe it's more. Maybe in that inhale, time stretches, giving you space to react. Maybe your consciousness feels it, a widening, a cosmic breath. On the other hand, think of how time can vanish. Hours disappear while scrolling your phone or during a deep conversation. Was that time contracting? Was reality pulling inward, compressing your awareness so tightly that you lost your grip on the passing of minutes? Some ancient philosophies hinted at this. The Vedic concept of kalpas describes time as cyclical, not just in events, but in breath-like patterns. The Tao speaks of flowing with the Tao, an eternal, rhythmic balance. Indigenous shamans spoke of time as a drumbeat, not a path, but a pulse. All of them were describing something eerily close to this hypothesis. Even modern science brushes against it. The idea of a cyclic universe, one that expands and contracts in an eternal loop, isn't fringe. Some cosmologists believe the Big Bang wasn't the beginning, but a rebound, a breath out after a breath in. And if space breathes, can time do any less? Let's go deeper. Imagine you're standing at the top of a mountain at dawn. The world is still. You breathe in, long, full, and just for a moment, it feels like the world inhales with you. That sensation, that subtle alignment, might not be coincidence. What if your body, your cells, your consciousness are synced to the universe's temporal rhythm? We know biological processes align with lunar and solar cycles. Our circadian rhythms are real, so why not a chronodynamic rhythm, a breathing clock of the cosmos itself? What if synchronicity, those eerie coincidences, are signs of aligned breathing? When the universal breath matches your personal rhythm, things click. Events line up. Opportunities arrive. You meet someone at exactly the right moment. You think of a person seconds before they call. It's not magic. It's resonance. But there's a darker edge too. If time breathes, then so do our windows of opportunity. Doors open during the inhale, but they close during the exhale. That means every expansion has urgency. Every contraction has finality. We are constantly surfing this invisible tide, and most of us don't even know we're in water. Now let's add the possibility of multiple timelines, many worlds theory. If time breathes, it could mean that different versions of reality rise and fall like bubbles in sync with these temporal expansions. You might feel a memory that isn't yours, a bleed-through from a parallel path that opened during the last inhale, but vanished during the exhale. Déjà vu, missing time, dreamlike clarity in moments of crisis, all symptoms of slipping between these waves. In this framework, meditation becomes more than calming the mind. It becomes synchronization, tuning yourself to the breath of the universe. When monks say, "Be here now," they may be guiding your awareness to the crest of the inhale, the expanding present where infinite paths lie ahead. But when they say, "Let go," they may be teaching how to surrender to the exhale, when those paths collapse into one. There's even room for emotion in this model. Have you ever noticed how sadness feels like compression, like being crushed inward, and how joy feels expansive, as if the world just got bigger? Maybe our emotions don't just reflect our internal states, but mirror the very rhythm of time. Perhaps your best days, those wide, electric days when everything goes right, are lived during the inhale of time itself. And your worst days are lived on the exhale, when everything contracts and the universe feels small, indifferent. So what can we do with this? Maybe, the next time you feel out of sync, you don't need more caffeine or distraction. Maybe you need to pause, breathe, feel the tempo of the world around you. Is it expanding or contracting? Are you forcing action on an exhale? Are you missing your moment on an inhale? You don't need to see the whole wave. You just need to surf the current one. Recognize the pattern. Inhale, create. Exhale, commit. Inhale, explore. Exhale, decide. The breathing reality hypothesis isn't just a scientific speculation. It's a call to awareness, a challenge to our assumptions about how reality works. It asks us to consider that the ticking of time might not be a straight road, but a living rhythm, a universal tide that shapes every moment of our existence. So, the next time you feel like time is slipping, or stretching, or standing still, maybe it's not in your head. Maybe it's the universe, taking a breath. And you're already a part of that breath, woven into the inhale and exhale of something far greater, something timeless. Let it breathe through you. The baggage code effect. What if the fear you carry inside you was never truly yours? What if the anxiety that tightens your chest before a storm, the unease that creeps in when you're alone, or the heartbreak you've never experienced, doesn't belong to you at all? What if these emotions were passed down like heirlooms, stitched into the very fabric of your identity, not through memory, but through something deeper, more ancient, something encoded in your soul? This is the baggage code effect, the unsettling possibility that emotional trauma is not born but inherited. Not metaphorically, but energetically. Just as genetics pass down eye color or the shape of your hands, what if our consciousness, our very essence, carries a kind of psychic inheritance, a legacy of sorrow, shame, fear, and guilt, not from your own actions, but from the unresolved echoes of those who came before you? It begins with a simple truth science is only starting to confront. Trauma rewires biology. We know this now. Holocaust survivors' grandchildren show elevated stress hormone levels, even without direct exposure to suffering. Descendants of war refugees, famine victims, even those who lived through slavery, they display symptoms of pain they never lived through, and yet they feel it. They suffer it, as if some invisible mark was placed on their soul. But what if it goes beyond genetics, beyond epigenetics? What if consciousness, not just the brain, but the immaterial field that animates the body, is like a passport, and every time it reincarnates, it collects a new stamp, a new scar, a new suitcase of unresolved baggage? Each lifetime adds weight, and each time we're born, we arrive not as blank slates, but as souls already carrying the residue of lifetimes before. Imagine this: a child with a paralyzing fear of drowning, despite never having seen the ocean. A man who flinches at sirens though he's never served in war. A woman unable to trust love, despite being surrounded by care. These aren't just quirks of personality. They may be the ghosts of former selves, whispering warnings. Wounds from lives erased from conscious memory, but still encoded in the vibration of being. Every soul might carry its own unique baggage code, a spectral barcode filled with emotions, unresolved lessons, karmic residues. And just like airport luggage tags, they follow us. They don't disappear. Not until we address them. Not until we open the suitcase and confront what's inside. We often say, "Let go of your fear," or "Heal your inner child." But what if it's not your inner child that's wounded? What if it's someone else's child, from another life, or another generation, and you're just the latest carrier? We become the stewards of pain that wasn't ours to begin with. And yet, it is now ours to resolve. That's the terrible and beautiful burden of it. We inherit it, but we are also the first ones in our lineage, maybe in our soul's entire journey, with the tools to face it. Think of it like this. You're standing at a train station. Around you are people walking with heavy luggage, some dragged behind them, others balanced on their heads. But many don't realize they're even carrying anything at all. These are inherited burdens, emotional tags, memories too old to remember, but too loud to ignore. The moment you stop and look down to see what's in your hand, the moment you notice the suitcase, that is when the real work begins. Some traditions call this karmic debt. Others describe it as ancestral trauma. Some call it reincarnational carryover. Whatever the name, the impact is the same. Invisible burdens shape our visible choices. They distort our relationships, guide our fears, manipulate our decisions. And we never question why. We just assume they are us. But what if they're not? What if you've never truly met yourself without the weight? Let's go deeper. Imagine you could map your soul's journey across time, lifetimes stacked like pages in a book. Some torn, some unfinished, some soaked in tears. If you could flip back through the chapters, would you find the origin of your loneliness? Would you find the battlefield where your panic attacks began? Would you see the betrayal that made it hard for you to trust, not in this life, but in one hundreds of years ago? There's a reason we connect with certain places instantly, a reason some people feel like home and others like danger. There's a reason we get déjà vu in a city we've never visited. Perhaps your soul remembers what your mind cannot. And then there are dreams, those strange symbolic stories we tell ourselves while asleep. Have you ever dreamed of dying, of drowning, of fleeing something indescribable? Have you ever felt grief in a dream so intense you woke up in tears? That may be the baggage code expressing itself, slipping through the cracks of consciousness. Even emotions that seem to come from nowhere, bursts of anger, deep sorrow, unprovoked anxiety, maybe fragments from older echoes. What if you've been fighting someone else's war inside yourself? So what do? How do we untangle what isn't ours? First, we must recognize it. That uneasy feeling you can't explain, that inexplicable resistance to joy. Start there. Ask, is this mine? Not just metaphorically, but spiritually. This simple question can shake the roots of identity. Because if it isn't yours, then the healing isn't about understanding it. It's about releasing it. Second, seek the patterns, the loops that keep happening in your life. Betrayals, fears, failures, they're not coincidences. They're invitations, repeated until resolved. You are the culmination of all the choices your soul has ever made, even the forgotten ones. And that means you are also the point of transformation. You can rewrite the code. Finally, choose to open the suitcase, not to carry it forward, not to wallow in its contents, but to unpack it, honor it, and leave it behind. Because here's the ultimate truth of the baggage code effect. The pain you carry might not be yours, but the power to heal it is. That is your sacred responsibility. You are the junction where past pain ends and future peace begins. So the next time you feel something heavy within, a fear, a doubt, a sorrow that doesn't quite make sense, don't ignore it. Don't suppress it. Look closer. Listen carefully. Ask yourself, whose emotion is this? You may find that it belongs to someone who never had the chance to let it go, but you do. And maybe, just maybe, that's why you're here. The sidetracked path, paradox. What if the life you were supposed to live isn't the one you're living right now, but a quiet turn you almost took? A class you skipped, a phone call you declined, a stranger on a train you never spoke to. Welcome to the sidetracked path paradox, where destiny doesn't just move forward, it branches like roots. And the richest soil might lie not on the road well paved, but in the hidden trails nearly missed. We grow up believing in a kind of forward motion, a straight line from childhood dreams to adult reality. You study, you specialize, you follow the plan, and life is supposed to reward that structure. But life isn't a railroad track. It's a web. And for many people, their most life-altering experiences weren't planned. They happened on detours, on accidents, On the side paths they almost ignored. Think about it. Some of the most influential inventions in history didn't emerge from intentional design. Take penicillin. Alexander Fleming didn't set out to discover the world's first antibiotic. He left a petri dish out by accident. That mistake, that unplanned fork in the road, ended up saving hundreds of millions of lives. It wasn't destiny in the heroic, predetermined sense. It was sidetrack, serendipity, a near miss with genius. Or consider Steve Jobs, who dropped out of college and randomly sat in on a calligraphy class. That small, seemingly useless decision would later inspire the typography on the Macintosh computer, bringing aesthetic elegance to technology and shaping the visual language of modern computing. Again, it wasn't on the path of engineering or business. It was on the fringe, the sidetrack. But it changed the world. And it's not just geniuses or inventors. This paradox applies to all of us. A woman moves cities for a job and misses the bus on her first day. Frustrated, she stops at a cafe she would never have noticed, and there she meets someone who becomes the love of her life. Was that her destiny? Or was it the paradox of the sidetrack, that sometimes it's the wrong turn that puts us in the right place? But here's where it gets more complex. We often resist the sidetrack. We're taught to stay focused, to pursue our goals with tunnel vision, and in doing so, we reject spontaneity. We reject risk. We reject randomness. Yet, randomness is where the universe does some of its best work. In physics, quantum mechanics tells us that uncertainty is not an error. It's a feature of reality. The particle is here and there until it's observed. Schrödinger's cat is alive and dead. And your life? It's a wave of probabilities, until you choose. What if the universe is offering you chances, not just once, but constantly? Hidden behind the people you almost talked to, the passions you nearly explored, the detours you dismissed too quickly. What if the real question isn't what is my purpose, but what was I too focused to see? Let's take this deeper. Imagine your timeline as a canyon with tributary rivers. The main flow is where you think you're going, but every branch, each overlooked choice, holds a different version of you. Not less real, not less meaningful, but simply unexplored. Some of these branches might have led you to failure, yes, but others? They might have led you to your most authentic self. The version of you that wasn't performing a role, the version that didn't just do what was expected, but what was felt. That brings us to a haunting truth. You may never know the full cost of the choices you didn't make. Think back to a moment where your gut pulled you in a direction, but logic overrode it. Maybe you wanted to move to a new city, but it wasn't practical. Maybe you had a dream, but you told yourself it was childish. Those moments weren't insignificant, they were forks, sidetracks. Some of them were the very places your soul was trying to reach. And now, maybe you feel a subtle ache, an echo of a life unlived. This is not a call to abandon reason or live recklessly. It's a call to honor intuition, to respect the whispers. Because sometimes, the loudest signs are not on the main road. They're on the quiet trails we're too busy to notice. Let's explore a more personal example. Say you're walking through a bookstore. You pass a shelf, and something catches your eye. A strange title, an author you've never heard of. You pause, you consider, and then you keep walking. It was just a book, right? Maybe. But maybe that book contained an idea, a spark, that would have led you to a new obsession, a new skill, a new career. Maybe reading that one book would have made you rethink your relationships, your job, your direction. We think of these moments as trivial, but over time, they compound. The difference between two lives may not be a single massive event, but 100 small sidetracks never taken. And that's where regret often lives. Not in the mistakes we made, but in the chances we never explored. Here's the twist: the sidetracked path. Paradox doesn't mean you've missed your only chance. It means that at any moment, even right now, there are sidetracks waiting. They're not labeled. They're not obvious. They don't come with guarantees, but they pulse with potential. It might be the hobby you've been secretly drawn to, the friend you've been meaning to reconnect with, the class you've thought about taking but keep putting off. These are not distractions. They might be keys. Keys to the version of you you're supposed to become. Not because a divine script says so, but because you choose to follow what feels right, not just what looks right. The paradox is this: the more you try to stay on the path, the more you risk becoming a version of yourself built only on predictability. But the more you allow for sidetracks, the uncomfortable, the uncertain, the seemingly irrelevant, the more alive you become. And here's a deeper layer. What if the universe is not just passively offering you options, but actively responding to your choices? A kind of dynamic architecture folding around your curiosity. When you dare to follow a sidetrack, it grows, it opens. And when you ignore it, it fades. Not out of punishment, but because reality flows where your attention goes. There's a quote, "Not all who wander are lost, but maybe, just maybe, those who never wander are." So next time life nudges you, softly, inconveniently, pause. Look, maybe the path you've been avoiding isn't a distraction at all. Maybe it's the very thing your story needs, because sometimes the door to everything you've ever wanted is slightly off to the side, and you'll only find it if you step away from the map. If you stop chasing the trail everyone else is on, and walk bravely toward the unknown road, the one that almost didn't exist until you chose to see it. That's the sidetracked path paradox, and it may just be the truest path you ever take. Word count, 5,073 characters. The folded future theory. What if the future isn't something waiting for us, but something we're already inside of? Only we can't see it because it's been folded. Imagine your life as a flat piece of paper. Time, if it were linear, would stretch in a straight path from birth to death. But what if someone, something, folded that sheet? What if every major event in your future is already inked on that paper, hidden just beyond your sight because you haven't yet reached the crease that unfolds it? This is the folded future theory. It proposes a breathtaking, unsettling idea that the future isn't ahead of us. It's here, folded within the fabric of our present. Every second, we unfold just a sliver more. Every decision, every movement, every breath presses us closer to the next crease. Think of a folded map. You're standing in one square. The other cities exist, already printed, already real, but they're hidden, unreachable, until you flip the right panel. That's what time could be. The untraveled parts are not undefined. They are simply folded, waiting. It's not an entirely new idea. Ancient mystics whispered it in metaphors. Quantum physicists hint at it in equations. Einstein himself described time not as a line, but as a landscape, a static block where past, present, and future all exist simultaneously. But our consciousness only perceives a single slice at a time, moving like a spotlight across this grand terrain. Now, layer that concept with modern physics. According to the theory of block time or eternalism, the universe is a four-dimensional space-time block. All moments, past, present, future, coexist. The now is just our subjective experience, like a needle moving along a vinyl record. From this perspective, the future is not something that happens. It already is. We just haven't arrived at its crease yet. But what folds it? That's the mystery. Some suggest it's our perception itself. Our consciousness, bound by causality, can only interpret time sequentially. Like a book, we flip page by page, but the whole story is already printed. The fold, then, is our limitation, our inability to see the entire timeline at once. Others believe the fold may be something far stranger, a universal intelligence, a quantum observer, or maybe time folds under the pressure of decision, the sheer weight of possibility causing space-time to bend and warp like origami in cosmic hands. Let's look at déjà vu. That eerie flash of familiarity, a moment you know you've experienced before. In the folded future theory, déjà vu may be a crease misalignment, a second where the page lifts and you accidentally peek at what's coming. Not memory, but a glitch in chronology. You've touched a future that's already there. Or take precognition, those dreams that seem absurd until they become real. A woman dreams of a plane crash only to see it happen the next day. Coincidence? Or a sliver of folded time caught in the fold's shimmer? The Mandela effect, collective false memories, might also find a home here. If the future is folded and we occasionally slip across layers, perhaps some folds overlap imperfectly. We remember what was true in a slightly different timeline. We remember Berenstain, not Berenstain. We recall a death that never happened. Not errors, but echoes from neighboring creases. Then there's time dilation. Astronauts on the International Space Station age slightly slower than people on Earth. Their clock ticks differently. Einstein showed us that time bends around gravity and speed, but if time can bend, Can it fold? Can events lie on top of each other, stacked like compressed layers in a cosmic book? And if so, is free will real? If the future is pre-written, just hidden, are we merely playing out a story we can't change? Or do our choices still matter? Here's where the folded future theory gets chilling. Because it offers two equally haunting possibilities. 1. Every action you take, every decision you make, was always going to happen. You're not making choices, you're discovering them. Like opening a pre-folded letter and reading words you thought you were writing. 2. The folds themselves shift depending on your actions. The map is printed, yes, but it's quantum paper. Every crease you touch creates new folds, new futures. You are both reader and author, flipping through dimensions of potential. Imagine a soldier walking into battle. He has two possible futures, death or survival. Both are already folded into time. But it's not until he moves, until his feet touch the ground in one direction or another, that one future unfolds and the other remains sealed. Or picture yourself at a crossroads. Career change, relationship decision, moment of crisis. In the folded future theory, every outcome already exists, but you're the one doing the unfolding. The universe holds the creases. You choose which one to pull open. This idea can be terrifying, but it can also be empowering. If the future exists in folded form, maybe fate isn't the chains we fear, but the origami wings we've yet to spread. Think back to your own life. Was there a moment where everything changed? Not because of destiny, but because you turned left instead of right? Made a phone call? Missed a train? These were not just random moments. They were folds. Pivots in your timeline that led to entirely different versions of now. And some part of you, deep, unconscious, might have sensed it. A tug in your gut. A stillness in the air. The weight of an unopened crease. The folded future theory doesn't claim to explain everything, but it invites us to see our lives differently. Not as linear journeys, but as elegant origami. Creases of moments we unfold, slowly revealing the intricate design beneath. So, the next time you feel stuck in the present, wondering if the future holds anything for you, remember, the map is already drawn, it's just folded, and every step you take is an unfolding, every breath is a corner turned. Every thought, every dream, every act of courage or fear peels back another layer. What waits in the next fold? That's the secret. But maybe, just maybe, you've already seen it. You just haven't unfolded it yet. And maybe the universe is waiting for you not to discover the future, but to remember it. The personality costume idea. What if who you think you are isn't really you? What if your personality, your likes, dislikes, fears, sense of humor, even your so-called identity, is just a carefully crafted costume, not something fake, but something temporary, a survival layer, a psychological outfit your deeper self chose to wear in order to navigate this particular version of reality. This is the personality costume idea, a concept that suggests what we call our personality isn't the essence of who we are. It's more like armor, more like camouflage, more like adaptation. You wear it not because it's truly you, but because it helps you survive, maybe even thrive, in the environmental, cultural, and emotional landscape you were dropped into. Think about it. You weren't born with your personality fully formed. You were born as awareness, raw, unshaped. Then slowly, layer by layer, you put on traits. Some were handed to you. Your family's expectations, the beliefs of your culture, the personality you had to develop to avoid conflict or gain affection. Others were stitched in from trauma. You became funny to diffuse tension, quiet to avoid attention, aggressive to stay safe. Every quirk, every behavior, it's not who you are. It's what helped you stay who you are. In this sense, your personality is less like a fingerprint, more like a suit of clothes tailored by experience. You've been wearing it so long, you forgot you could take it off. Let's go deeper. Have you ever caught yourself reacting to something and thought, why did I say that? That's not me. Or felt disconnected from your own behavior, like watching yourself act out a role. That may not be a lapse. That may be your deeper self noticing the seams in the costume. Psychologists talk about the false self, the persona we develop to meet social demands. Carl Jung called it the persona mask. It's not necessarily a lie, it's functional. It lets you operate in society, in family, in work. But it's not your soul. It's not your core awareness. It's just the version of you that made sense in this timeline. Let's say you were born in a strict household. You learned to be obedient, polite, restrained. That became your personality. The good kid, the peacekeeper. But maybe deep inside, there's a rebellious, curious, wild part of you that never got to breathe. You wore the personality costume of the quiet one because that's what kept you safe. But is that the real you? Now imagine someone else, loud, boisterous, always cracking jokes. Maybe they grew up in a chaotic home where humor was the only way to get attention. Their costume is the clown. Underneath, maybe there's a quiet, sensitive self who just wanted to be taken seriously. These aren't just stories. These are mechanisms, adaptive traits, not permanent truths. Even your preferences, foods you like, music you love, the colors you choose, may be influenced by early associations, not essential taste. You might think you hate solitude, but what if that aversion is just your mind avoiding the silence, where the deeper self whispers truths the costume can't handle? What if, underneath all that, is someone very different? There are moments, brief, powerful, when the costume slips. Sometimes in deep grief, sometimes in overwhelming joy, sometimes during meditation, near-death experiences, or psychedelic journeys. Suddenly people report feeling like they saw their real self, not the one they play in everyday life, but something ancient, something unshakable, a calm observer, a presence. That's the self beneath the costume. Not bound by personality, not ruled by habit, just awareness. And here's where things get even stranger. Some spiritual traditions argue that this deeper self has worn many costumes, across lives, across realities. Each personality was a tool for a specific mission. You were a warrior in one, a healer in another, a hermit, a tyrant, a lover, a ghost. Each time, the deeper self chose a personality suit that would best serve its purpose in that timeline. In this life, your personality might be shaped by your location, your gender, your class, your experiences, all chosen not by chance, but as constraints. The costume was tailored for the challenge you signed up for. But what happens when the costume no longer fits? You start to feel restless, anxious, misaligned. The habits that once served you now trap you. You laugh at the wrong times. You agree with things you don't believe. You feel like you're playing a part in a play you don't even like. That's the moment the deeper self knocks. Not gently, urgently. It's telling you, the costume got you here. But now, it's time to evolve. So, how do you take off the costume? You start by noticing. Where are you performing instead of living? When do you laugh to fit in instead of express joy? When do you stay silent not because you agree, but because you're scared to be seen? Ask yourself, is this trait helping me grow, or just helping me survive? Real self-awareness begins when you stop defending your personality and start investigating it. And what happens if you remove it entirely? Some fear there's nothing underneath. But that's the illusion the costume wants you to believe. In reality, what's underneath is terrifying only because it's free, untethered, vast. It doesn't care what society thinks. It doesn't care if it fits. It simply is. And that freedom is where true power lives. Because the deeper self doesn't need validation. It doesn't need applause. It doesn't get offended. It just observes. It creates. It acts without fear. It loves without ego. It sees through the drama of personality and smiles. But there's a paradox. You can't fully live without a costume, just like you can't walk naked into a snowstorm. You can't walk through this world without some form of identity. The key is to wear the costume lightly, to remember it's a tool, not a prison, to know that you're not the role, you're the actor who chose it. And the best part? You can rewrite your costume. You can choose new traits. Be bold where you were timid. Be still where you were frantic. Be kind where you were cruel. Personality isn't fixed. It's fluid. It's reactive. Moldable. It's your creation, not your cage. So, if today you feel lost, worn out, or like you've been faking it for too long, maybe it's time to unzip the costume, to breathe, to meet the version of you who was never trying to be liked, just trying to be real. Because that version, that's the one who's been watching all along, from behind the eyes, beneath the words, inside the breath, waiting for you to remember, you are not what you wear. You are the one who chooses what to become. The digital dust. Thought, imagine every forgotten moment of your life, every face that slipped from memory, every whisper lost to time, every detail you swore you'd remember but didn't, still exists. Not erased, not gone, just scattered, invisible, lingering in the shadows like digital dust. What if your consciousness is a recording device that never truly deletes, only archives? What if every forgotten thought, every overlooked second, every dream half remembered is still with you, hovering like static in the corners of your mind, waiting for the right moment to recompile? This is the digital dust thought, the haunting notion that memory is not truly linear or fragile, but simply buried beneath layers of distraction, trauma, and time. That every lived moment is a file saved in some hidden folder of the soul, and that in the right conditions, dreams, death, or deep unconsciousness, these files can be reaccessed, recompiled, re-experienced. We live in a world where data doesn't disappear. Delete a file from your computer, and it isn't gone. It's fragmented, displaced, but still recoverable if you know where to look. Your brain might work the same way. Think of it as an organic hard drive, one that records everything, but whose search function is clunky and limited. You don't lose memories, you just lose the map to find them. And yet, sometimes they come back. A smell, a song, a flash of color. And suddenly you're 5 years old again, holding someone's hand. Someone long dead. That moment was never erased. It was merely layered beneath the noise of now. It lingered, just like digital dust, waiting for a breeze of emotion to lift it back into your awareness. Think of the dreams you've had. Those uncanny narratives that seem too detailed to be fabricated. You're walking through a house you've never seen, but know intimately. A stranger kisses your forehead, and you know, somehow they once mattered deeply. You wake up confused, shaken, disturbed by the intensity of something you can't place. Maybe these dreams aren't fiction. Maybe they're memory fragments, unindexed, scrambled data pulled from forgotten subfolders of your subconscious. There are reports of people under deep hypnosis recalling the wallpaper pattern in their childhood bedroom, down to the number of flowers on the wall, or of those near death who see a flood of moments. Not just big ones, but small ones. Sipping water on a porch, hearing rain on a tin roof, watching ants on a sidewalk. These aren't the highlights of life. They're the background, the digital dust, the unappreciated details that still define the soul. Now ask yourself, where do these memories go? If they can return in moments of vulnerability, they must still be there. It means you are never fully separate from who you were. Your past selves don't vanish. They whisper through dreams, déjà vu, and spontaneous emotion. And this goes deeper. What if emotional reactions you can't explain, those irrational gut feelings, instant dislikes, or overwhelming sadness out of nowhere, aren't just psychological anomalies? What if they are your mind glitching, momentarily accessing a memory fragment, like a ghost file opening without your permission? You don't recognize the source, but your body does. Your soul does. Some cultures believe that at death, your entire life flashes before your eyes. But what if it's more than that? What if death is the final reboot, the moment your consciousness reindexes all files, organizes every scattered piece of data, and you suddenly remember everything? Every lie you told, every time someone touched you kindly, every sunrise you forgot to appreciate, every name you whispered in the dark. They return not to haunt you, but to complete you. Maybe this is why ghosts exist, not as external entities, but as unresolved code, fragments of a memory system stuck between users. Places that hold high emotional resonance might still echo with the digital dust of those who lived there. The smell of a room, the silence of an empty chair, might not be haunted by a spirit, but by unclosed memory loops waiting to be processed. And this isn't just spiritual speculation. Neuroscientists have discovered that the brain stores far more information than we consciously access. Micro-perceptions, sounds, faces, environmental details are all logged. In lab experiments, people could identify complex visual data they didn't consciously remember seeing. Somewhere, deep down, the mind knew. The dust had never left. It had only settled. Now, think about this. We're entering an age where AI can reconstruct faces from brainwaves, predict thoughts from neural activity, and simulate voices from mere seconds of audio. If machines can do this, what makes you think your own consciousness can't? What if your dreams are your internal AI, scrambling to recompile the thousands of lost files that define who you truly are? What if the you that you know is just the visible interface, while the real you is still buffering? There's a strange comfort in this thought, that nothing is ever truly lost, that even the people you forgot, the moments you let slip, the feelings you didn't understand, are still somewhere inside you. Like dust on an old vinyl, they may distort the song, but they never stop being part of it. And one day when you're ready, when the moment is quiet and the noise of life fades, you might hear the melody again. Not new, not invented, just remembered. This is why solitude matters, why silence matters. They are the defragmenters of consciousness, the broom that stirs the dust. And sometimes, when you're still enough, the fog lifts and a piece of you, lost for years, steps back into the light. The digital dust thought isn't about fear, it's about awareness, that nothing in your life is meaningless, that every experience matters, even if you don't consciously recall it. The universe is a network of information, and you, your very being, are a data node. Your dreams, your memories, your essence are all recordings in a cosmic archive. So, the next time you feel a sudden shiver for no reason, or remember something that never happened, or cry in a dream you can't explain, don't dismiss it. Don't brush it off. It might be the dust stirring, a file opening, a forgotten version of you tapping gently, asking to be seen. And when the time comes, at the edge of sleep or at the end of life, you may find that nothing was ever truly lost, just waiting, hidden in the quiet, suspended in dust. The sleeper species concept. What if Earth is not truly ours? What if, long before the first humans stood upright, long before even the dinosaurs roamed the land, an ancient species buried itself beneath the planet's crust, not dead, not extinct, but dormant? They sleep not because of defeat, but by design, waiting. Not for time to pass, not for tectonic shifts or cosmic events, but for a specific human thought to form, a mental signal, a cognitive key, a singular configuration of awareness that could awaken them. This is the sleeper species concept, a chilling possibility that the most significant event in human history might not be a war or a discovery, but a single idea that we haven't even realized we're approaching. Imagine for a moment that buried deep beneath the Earth's mantle lies a civilization, organic yet far more advanced than we can comprehend. Not a species made of flesh in the way we understand it, but a consciousness, a hive of thought, evolved not through biology alone, but through eons of psychic calibration. They once walked the surface, perhaps before Earth was even Earth as we know it. Maybe they terraformed this planet as a testbed or a sanctuary, but then they vanished, intentionally. And before retreating into the crust, they seeded the biosphere with complex evolutionary patterns, crafting a long and winding path through microbial life, up through reptiles, mammals, and finally, us. But why would such a being go dormant? And why wait for thought to reawaken? Because thought is evolution's final frontier. Muscles can grow, brains can expand, but ideas shape reality. To this ancient sleeper species, we are not the endpoint of evolution. We are the ignition switch. Think of it like a lock. For billions of years, this planet has been forming the tumblers. Evolution is the process of aligning them. And human consciousness, our thoughts, beliefs, fears, and curiosities are the key. But not just any thought will do. It must be specific, precise, a concept so unique and powerful that it aligns perfectly with their psychic architecture. And once that thought is formed, once it exists inside even one human mind, they will know. They will stir. This isn't just fantasy. There are real-world analogs. Consider sleeper cells in biology, certain viruses or genes that lie dormant until triggered, or the pineal gland, long considered by mystics to be a gateway to higher awareness, yet biologically a vestige of our evolutionary past, or mushrooms, organisms that exist as vast underground networks for years before suddenly fruiting. Nature is full of systems that wait, and if we're part of nature, who's to say we're not surrounded by others who are doing the same? Now, Picture this: a child in 2047, somewhere in Iceland, drawing spirals in the snow. He's not thinking of anything grand, just following a mental itch, sketching patterns he doesn't understand. But in doing so, he visualizes a concept, an abstract pattern of thought that's never been formed before in human history. It's not a symbol, it's not a word, it's a frequency, a rhythm of thought that resonates with the dormant species below, and somewhere, thousands of miles down, an ancient pulse flickers to life. Tectonic plates shift, not violently, but subtly. Earthquakes that feel like whispers begin to ripple across regions. People report strange dreams. A collective unease rises, as if something deep within the earth has exhaled for the first time in ages. Scientists can't explain it. Governments go silent. And then the transmissions begin. Not through radio, not through Wi-Fi or satellite, but through thought. Humans begin to receive ideas they don't understand. Dreams of symbols that never existed. Equations without numbers. Concepts so far removed from language they manifest as feelings. Overwhelming, ecstatic, terrifying. These are not messages, they are instructions. The sleeper species is communicating not with our machines, but with our minds, using the same structure we use to awaken them. Now we must ask, why would they wait for us? What makes our minds, our thoughts, so crucial? Because we are the final test. In their view, life's ultimate proof is not survival, it's self-awareness. Not the kind that simply recognizes a reflection in a mirror, but the kind that dares to look at the fabric of reality and question it. The thought they await is not scientific or religious. It's existential. It's the moment a mind realizes, I am not alone in thought. My consciousness is not isolated. It is part of something vaster. That recognition, shared without fear, ego, or domination, may be the exact signal the sleepers need. But here's where it becomes unnerving. What if we've already had the thought? What if someone, maybe a philosopher, maybe a child, maybe someone forgotten by history, already reached that awareness and we're now living in the echo of that awakening? What if the increase in global anxiety, the rise of unexplainable synchronicities, the widespread existential dread, and the sudden obsession with artificial intelligence, simulation theory, and cosmic meaning are not coincidences, but symptoms of the sleeper's stirring? And what if they are not coming back to rule us, but to merge with us? Perhaps they don't want to reclaim the earth, but to integrate, to download into our consciousness and expand their reach beyond the crust. Through our dreams, through our ideas, through our art. Maybe our thoughts aren't just unlocking them, maybe they're building bridges. But integration isn't always peaceful. What happens to a civilization when its thoughts are no longer its own? When every moment of creativity may be laced with influence from an ancient mind? Would we know it? Would we question it? Or would we accept it, believing we've simply evolved into something more? Here's the terrifying truth. You might be the key. Not metaphorically, but literally. Your next idea, your next daydream or scribble or spark of intuition could be the final puzzle piece, the one they've waited millennia to receive. You wouldn't feel it. You wouldn't hear the earth crack open or see eyes glowing in the dark. But you might feel a silence go still, a pressure release, a quiet recognition that something is now awake. And once they rise, there is no going back. Because once thought evolves to meet them, they will never sleep again. And Earth will no longer be a planet of humans trying to reach the stars, but a planet of minds, joining something far older, far deeper, and far more alien than we ever imagined. This is not science fiction. This is the sleeper species concept, and it may already be too late to unthink the thought. The frozen possibility field. You are not just one version of yourself. Somewhere, perhaps just outside your perception, are countless variations of you, frozen in a vast quantum field, waiting. Each one is a different path you could have taken, a different life you could have lived. They're not fantasy. They're possibilities, real, suspended, unchosen. Imagine them encased in invisible ice, a still life of every decision never made. This is the frozen possibility field. According to quantum theory, reality doesn't collapse into one outcome until it's observed or interacted with. Before that, it exists in a superposition, a cloud of potential outcomes. This isn't just theoretical, it's been demonstrated in experiments like the double slit test. Particles behave as if they exist in multiple places until measured. Observation collapses the wave function and pins reality into one form. Now apply that to life. Every decision you've ever faced, whether to speak or stay silent, to run or to fight, to love or to walk away, each one carried multiple outcomes, and each outcome still exists. Somewhere. Frozen, silent, unchosen. Picture a frozen landscape of crystal paths, endless and glimmering. Each path is a timeline, a version of you that could have been. One path where you moved to another country and became a painter. Another where you said yes to love or no to addiction. Another where you never survived that accident. And still another where you never existed at all. The frozen possibility field is that infinite expanse. Every potential you is suspended in quantum stillness, waiting for your next decision to melt the ice and give one path the warmth of reality. You don't see these versions, but you feel them. You feel them in the weight of regret, in the pang of nostalgia for a future that never came, in déjà vu, in the dreams where you're someone else, living a life that feels too familiar to be fiction. When you choose, you are not simply acting, you are activating. You are melting the ice around one version and collapsing the infinite into the real. But here's the twist. The versions you don't choose don't disappear. They persist, but frozen. They echo through the universe as probabilities that almost were. They are shadows that never reach the firelight. Consider a moment from your own life, one that changed everything. A phone call you didn't make, a job you turned down, a lie you told, or truth you finally spoke. Now, imagine the alternate versions of you that did the opposite. They're not just imaginary. They're trapped in the quantum lattice of this frozen field, inaccessible but real, and the field grows with you. Every time you face a choice, no matter how small, you expand the field. A conversation you almost had, a stranger you almost helped, a street you almost crossed. These are the moments that birth new branches. Most of them are microscopic, yes, but over time they build a forest of versions, and you are the only one melting your way through it. There's something hauntingly beautiful about that. We often think of life as linear, one arrow, one destiny. But that's a simplification. The frozen possibility field tells a different story. You are not one arrow, but a prism of infinite refracted outcomes. You are the observer, the decider, the navigator, and every choice you make leaves behind a trail of frozen selves that almost were you. Science fiction often plays with the concept of the multiverse, parallel realities where every version of you lives simultaneously. But the frozen possibility field isn't about fully formed parallel universes. It's about potential states, suspended just before birth, waiting for your decision to animate them. And here's where it gets even deeper. According to some interpretations of quantum mechanics, particularly Hugh Everett's many worlds theory, every possible outcome of every event actually occurs in its own branching universe. But the frozen possibility field theory adds a psychological and existential twist. Most of these outcomes don't get activated, not unless your consciousness moves in that direction. In other words, reality is not endlessly branching without consequence. It's selective, it's personal, it's interactive. So, you may wonder, how do I know I'm choosing the right version of myself? How do I know I'm melting the best path? That's the paradox. You don't. You can't see the field. You can't walk among the frozen selves. But sometimes, you sense them. You feel the tension at the crossroads, the heaviness of a big decision. That's not just stress. It's the field, calling. The frozen versions humming beneath the surface of your reality, waiting to see which one you will become. And when you choose, when you act, you don't just change the present. You change what could have been. You send ripples backward into the field, freezing some possibilities forever and unfreezing others. Let's say you decide to pursue a new passion. That decision doesn't just change your tomorrow, it seals off an entire web of futures where you never tried. You have created heat, consciousness, momentum, and melted one icy self into existence. And once melted, there is no refreezing. That path is yours now. The others, still there, still real, but forever unchosen. It's why regret can feel so heavy. You're not just mourning what happened, you're grieving the frozen self you could have been. But this also means that hope is always alive, because at every moment, countless versions of you are still there, waiting to be thawed. waiting for you to become them. You are never too late. Even in your darkest moments, the field is full. There are still futures where you are happy, healthy, brave, kind. You may not see the paths yet, but they are there, etched in quantum frost, shimmering in the cold silence of potential. And all it takes is a choice. So next time you hesitate, next time you feel the pull of fear or uncertainty, remember, you are not just deciding what to do. You are melting a path through a frozen universe of yous. You are awakening a version of yourself that has been waiting in stillness. You are shaping not only the present, but the echoing expanse of what might have been. Every time you act, the field responds. Every breath is a chance to unfold, and every possibility is real until the ice is broken and one version begins to breathe. The looping scream theory. What if everything we know, every culture, every war, every triumph of humanity, was not the result of natural evolution or divine intervention, but something far colder? What if Earth itself is not a cradle of life, but a lab? A petri dish seeded with chaos, watched and studied not by gods, but by distant civilizations far beyond our perception. This is the lab rat planet hypothesis, a chilling possibility that Earth is an experiment in controlled disorder, a grand simulation of conflict, growth, pain, and unpredictability, all observed through lenses we can't even detect. From the outside, Earth would be a perfect test subject, remote, isolated, teeming with variables, a place where intelligence emerged not as an inevitability but as a gamble, the kind of place you'd choose if your goal was not order, but unpredictability. Because unlike sterile simulations or controlled planetary colonies, Earth thrives on entropy. Our weather is chaotic. Our tectonic plates constantly shift. Our species adapt, mutate, break, rebuild. It's a mess. And maybe that's the point. Imagine an intergalactic scientific council, a federation of hyper-advanced species who long ago transcended violence, conflict, even emotion. For them, Earth would be a fascinating curiosity, a case study in primitive sentience, but not from a place of malice, rather from a place of necessity. They need us not for our wisdom, but for our unpredictability, like a lab rat bred not for beauty, but for the chaos it carries. Our wars, from ancient tribal battles to nuclear standoffs, may be horrific to us, but to an alien observer, they are data points. Our rapid technological advancement, often unchecked by ethics or caution, is a variable. Our ability to love, to destroy, to forgive, to deceive, these are traits they may no longer possess. Traits they may need to study in order to remember what it meant to evolve. Let's take this deeper. Consider how quickly humans adapt to trauma. We suffer, and yet we build. We endure climate collapse, political instability, resource shortages, and somehow, we keep going. To a detached observer, that level of resilience is rare, it's chaotic, it's emotional, and it's deeply valuable in a universe that may have lost its wild edge. There's an unsettling pattern in our history. Sudden leaps in knowledge, fire, language, agriculture, then electricity, atomic power, artificial intelligence. These jumps didn't happen gradually. They came in bursts, like someone flicking on the lights in intervals. Could these be nudges? Controlled variables introduced by those running the experiment? And why the isolation? For a planet with advanced life, we're strangely quarantined. No contact, no confirmed signals, just silence from the stars. What if this isn't because we're alone, but because we're not ready? Or worse, because contact would contaminate the experiment. Some argue that if aliens existed, they'd have landed by now. But think like a scientist. Would you barge into a lab and start talking to the mice in the maze? Or would you watch, silently, waiting to see how they behave under pressure? Maybe this is why Earth is so paradoxical. We are both brilliant and self-destructive, capable of transcendent art and genocidal violence. We love unconditionally and hate irrationally. It doesn't make sense, unless chaos is the desired outcome, unless the goal isn't harmony, but evolution through friction. Think about our media, how we're obsessed with surveillance, reality shows, social experiments, simulations. What if that obsession is a faint echo of what's being done to us? A subconscious mirroring of the experiment we're inside of? Even our myths whisper of watchers, gods from the sky, beings who descended and shaped humanity, the Anunnaki, the Nephilim, the architects of Atlantis. We treat them as legends. But what if they were researchers, early experimenters, observers who once walked among us before the test protocol changed? And now, consider the strange persistence of certain themes in our dreams and hallucinations: abduction, examination, glowing lights, unknown languages. We dismiss them as imagination, but they follow patterns too consistent to ignore. Could these be memory leaks? Data spikes breaking through the mental firewall of the test? If Earth is a lab rat planet, then the true question is not who is watching, but why. Are they trying to learn from us? Are we a warning system, an example of what happens when entropy is left unchecked? Or are we a seed, an early prototype of intelligence being groomed for something greater? Perhaps we are not the end product. Perhaps we are the chaos engine, the volatile strain designed to shake stagnation in a sterile universe. A living proof that conflict breeds innovation, that pain gives birth to compassion, and that unpredictability might be the most powerful force in existence. This isn't to say we are slaves or simulations, in the traditional sense. We have choice. But what if the boundaries of that choice are framed by walls we cannot see? What if those moments of pure coincidence, where lives change in seconds, are actually control variables being adjusted in real time? A sudden natural disaster, the invention of the internet, a pandemic, a flash of inspiration. What if these are not random? What if they are programmed chaos injections meant to test our response patterns? And here's the darkest angle. What if the end of the experiment is already scheduled? A final event, a data purge, a concluding moment to see how the variables collapse, not to destroy us, but to complete the cycle, to end the observation with the ultimate question answered: what happens when chaos becomes self-aware? If that's true, then we may be nearing that point. Our technology is accelerating beyond our wisdom. We now simulate worlds within our own. We create digital humans. We manipulate genetics. We play God, inside a test run by something godlike. We are the lab rats who built their own experiments, the subjects trying to rewrite their own protocols. And maybe, just maybe, that's the final phase of the test, to see if we realize what we are and still choose to become something more. Because if we can rise above our programming, if we can stare into the eyes of our creators, not in fear, but with understanding, then maybe the experiment ends not in destruction, but in invitation. Maybe we become more than a test. Maybe we become the next observers. Until then, the glass walls remain. The watchers wait. And we run the maze, unaware that every turn we take echoes across galaxies. The lab rat planet hypothesis. What if everything we've ever believed about our origins is a beautiful, deliberate lie? What if Earth is not a cosmic accident, not a product of random evolution, but a perfectly crafted chaos engine, a laboratory of sentient unpredictability designed to be watched, measured, and studied? This is the lab rat planet hypothesis, a theory that suggests our world is not the main stage of creation, but a petri dish, a sprawling experiment of emotion, conflict, innovation, and irrationality, observed by entities far beyond our comprehension. The idea is not just provocative, it's chilling, because it rewrites the story of us, not as chosen, not as dominant, but as test subjects, organisms bred in a controlled but volatile ecosystem, not just for survival, but for observation. And if you stop and look at the absurdity of human history, our wars, our dreams, our paradoxes, it starts to feel less like chaos and more like theater, or worse, data collection. Let's begin with the question of seeding. Earth is curiously fertile for life. Positioned in the Goldilocks zone, it has just the right temperature, just the right atmospheric blend, just the right magnetic field, just the right moon-to-planet ratio. Too perfect? Some argue yes. That these coincidences are not random at all, but indicators of terraforming. That Earth was engineered to be a psychological crucible where sentient life is forced to make decisions under pressure, within contradiction, in the face of mortality and limited knowledge. And who benefits from such an environment? Not us. Not really. We suffer. We struggle. We create meaning and then destroy it. But a higher intelligence, one not bound by time, flesh, or emotion, might find Earth fascinating. Not for its beauty, but for its volatility. A planet where every species fights for dominance, where even the apex species turns on itself, not out of necessity, but ideology. This isn't just life, it's chaos. And chaos is rich with data. Now, imagine an entity, non-corporeal, vast in intellect, capable of simulating entire civilizations for analysis. Why simulate when you can observe the real thing? And why invent something entirely new when you can plant the seeds and let nature, or what we call nature, run its course? They seed Earth with microbial life. They tweak the atmosphere. They nudge the evolutionary trajectory with mass extinctions and genetic bursts. Every once in a while, they accelerate consciousness with subtle shifts. The rise of fire, language, agriculture, all data points, all part of the grand experiment. What are they studying? Perhaps the central question, can chaos produce cohesion? Can a species born of violence, fear, and separation evolve into something unified, aware, and ethical? Or will it always collapse under its own contradictions? We are not being tested for entertainment. We are being tested for transformation. There's precedence in our own behavior. Consider lab rats. We don't just study them for disease. We study how they behave under stress, under scarcity, under isolation. We create mazes to test intelligence, choice, desperation. We observe their reactions to drugs, environments, even deception. Sound familiar? Zoom out from the human timeline. Look at our wars, revolutions, renaissances, collapses. It's a pattern. Rise, chaos, rebuild, advance, fall, again and again. What if that pattern isn't random, but precisely the loop that these galactic observers are measuring? Each generation is the next iteration of the test. Each culture a new variable. Each technological leap a new condition. Let's take a darker turn. What if they intervene? Not often, not overtly, but occasionally to steer the course. Crop circles, sudden leaps in technology, unexplainable architectural alignments across ancient civilizations, the missing link in evolution, the origin of language, the inexplicable genius of figures like Tesla, Da Vinci, or Hypatia. Not miracles, not accidents, just injections, data triggers. A way to observe how humanity responds to the unexplained. Do we worship it? Fear it? Destroy it? And here's where it becomes deeply unsettling. What if some of us know? Not consciously, but intuitively. What if that existential anxiety we all carry, the suspicion that we're being watched, judged, measured, isn't paranoia? What if our myths of gods watching from the sky, our dreams of being abducted, our religions that revolve around obedience and test, are not projections, but residual echoes of truth? Our subconscious remembering something our minds were trained to forget. Even our most advanced thinkers flirt with this concept. Elon Musk once said, "It's highly likely we're living in a simulation." But what if the simulation isn't digital? What if it's ecological, biological, emotional? Not code, but culture. Not pixels, but people. And the simulation isn't running in a computer. It's running in the minds of the watchers, a live stream from Earth. An evolutionary feed watched by beings who do not sleep, do not die, and do not interfere unless the experiment requires correction. But here's the twist, the most devastating implication. What if the experiment has a threshold, a final data point? What if Earth is approaching the end of the study? What happens when the experiment is complete? When the results are conclusive? Do they leave us be? Do they reward us with contact? Or do they erase the system to begin anew, a reset for the next iteration? Perhaps this explains our growing unease, the rise in apocalyptic media, the increase in global anxiety, the sense that something big is coming, but no one knows what. Maybe we're feeling the countdown, not in numbers, but in intuition. Or maybe the test was never about us as a species, but about individuals, about you, your response, your awareness. Because in any lab test, there's always one rat that behaves unexpectedly. That breaks the mold. That stops reacting to the environment and starts questioning it. What if that's you? What if by becoming aware, by realizing the pattern, sensing the watchers, questioning the maze, you shift the result? Maybe the real test is consciousness becoming self-aware within confinement. Maybe they're not watching to see if we survive, but to see if we wake up. Because the lab rat that escapes the maze doesn't just find freedom, it rewrites the experiment, the Stillness Singularity. There is a place no map can lead you to, no compass can point toward. It is not found in space, nor in time, but in something more intimate, in the silence behind your thoughts, the stillness beneath your breath. It is not peace in the traditional sense. It is not calm that comes after a storm. It is the absence of storm itself. The singularity of stillness, a point so absolute in its quiet that all identity, emotion, and even existence as we define it seem to dissolve. But within that dissolution waits something surprising. Not nothing, but your truest self. We are born into noise. From the first gasp of air, the world floods us with stimulation. Color, sound, language, expectations. We learn to navigate chaos. We learn to respond, to react, to become. But we rarely stop. We rarely still. Stillness is not a value in our culture. It's often mistaken for laziness, for passivity, for stagnation. But what if the most profound form of movement is not outward, but inward? Not velocity, but gravity. Not expansion, but implosion. Into the singularity of self. Imagine the universe before time began. A singular point of infinite density. No expansion, no heat, no stars. Only stillness. Perfect, infinite, unknowable stillness. And from that stillness, everything exploded outward. The Big Bang, the galaxies, the atoms, us. We are the echoes of that explosion. We are noise, movement, becoming. But what if that singularity wasn't just a physical origin? What if it's also a psychological return point, a state buried deep within every conscious being? This is not metaphor. Studies on meditation and neural silence show that the brain, when stripped of stimulus, begins to reveal different patterns. People in deep meditative states report not bliss, but nothingness. Not emptiness as in sadness, but emptiness as in vastness. The silence becomes a mirror, and what it reflects is not your name, your age, your trauma, or your dreams. It reflects presence, raw, unfiltered being. The stillness singularity is that state. A mental gravity well into which thought, identity, and emotion collapse. But here's the paradox. The more you try to reach it, the farther it seems, because trying is motion, desiring is noise. You can't enter the stillness singularity through effort. You must surrender. You must allow. Think of it like this. Imagine a pool of water. If you splash and thrash, you disturb the surface. The reflection becomes distorted. But if you sit still, truly still, the water settles. The mirror clears, and you see something unexpected. Not your face, but something beneath it. A quiet awareness, watching without judgment, without story. This awareness is who you've always been beneath the layers, before trauma, before ego, before language. You are not the waves. You are the ocean waiting for the waves to calm. People spend their entire lives chasing identity. Titles, roles, achievements, believing that in some future version of themselves, they will finally arrive. But arrival doesn't come through accumulation. It comes through subtraction, removing what you are not until only what you are remains. A woman once described a near-death experience where, for a brief moment, her entire sense of self dissolved. No body, no fear, just a vast, unmoving awareness. She said it wasn't light or darkness. It wasn't a tunnel or a voice. It was stillness, pure, unshakable stillness. And in that moment, she realized that what she called self her whole life was only a performance. The real self was the silence behind the performance. This concept resonates across spiritual traditions. In Hinduism, it's the state of Turiya, pure consciousness beneath waking, dreaming, and deep sleep. In Buddhism, it's shunyata, emptiness not as void, but as fullness beyond form. In Christian mysticism, it's the still small voice, the silence of God, the center of the soul. Across time and culture, seekers have encountered the singularity, not in temples or books, but in stillness. And yet, we run from it, because stillness can feel like death, the death of identity, of control, of ego. It's why people find it so hard to meditate, to be alone, to sit in silence. Because in the absence of noise, we're forced to confront what we've hidden, all the pain, the regrets, the shame. But here's the secret. Those things only scream in the beginning. As the stillness deepens, they fall silent too. And what remains is truth. Not personal truth, but universal truth. The stillness singularity isn't about becoming something more. It's about realizing you were never less, that beneath your striving, beneath your suffering, You are already whole, already home. You are not the journey. You are the still point the journey returns to. In the modern world, this concept is revolutionary. A culture addicted to motion cannot comprehend the power of pause. A society obsessed with doing cannot grasp the miracle of being. But if you can glimpse it, even for a moment, it changes everything. The way you breathe, the way you listen, the way you love. Imagine standing in a forest, no phone, no clock, no agenda, just the sound of wind through leaves, and suddenly, you're not thinking. You're not interpreting. You're not reacting. You're simply there, present, whole. That is a sliver of the singularity, a tiny echo of what's possible when we stop trying to be and simply are. Even science, in its relentless pursuit of answers, begins to touch this concept. The Planck scale, the smallest measurable unit of space-time, is not motion, it's boundary. Beyond it, motion doesn't even make sense. Time stops having meaning. Physics itself collapses. And at that threshold is silence. So what if consciousness also has a Planck scale, a point where the mind ceases to move and the self ceases to split, where you are no longer the thinker or the thought, but the space in which both rise and fall? That is the Stillness Singularity. And the most extraordinary thing about it, it's not somewhere far. It's here, now, always available, always waiting. Not in a cave, not on a mountaintop, but beneath every breath, behind every thought, and underneath the endless scroll of your life. You don't need to go find it. You only need to stop running from it. Because in that absolute stillness, there is no fear, no lack, no noise. Only the profound realization that what you've been seeking was never out there. It was always here, in the silence, in the stillness, in you. The forgotten door phenomenon. There may be a moment in your life you can't remember, not because it wasn't important, but because it was too important, too raw, too dangerous. A moment that threatened the structure of your reality so completely that your mind did the only thing it could. It locked it away, sealed it behind a mental door, not erased, not destroyed, just forgotten. This is the forgotten door phenomenon. This theory proposes that human consciousness has built-in psychological safeguards, emergency vaults designed not for trauma, but for existential overload. Unlike repression, which hides memories of pain, this goes deeper. The forgotten door is not just about what hurt, it's about what didn't make sense, what your brain could not fit into the frameworks of space, time, or logic. Imagine walking through a forest as a child. You see something in the trees, a shape that doesn't belong, a flicker of color your eyes can't classify, a hum that sounds like music but comes from the sky and ground simultaneously. You stare, your young mind reaching for context, for comprehension, but nothing comes. Just raw perception, the alien, the impossible. The moment overwhelms you. Then, silence. You blink, and it's gone. Later, you forget it happened at all. But did it? Or was it sealed? The human mind is a pattern machine. It understands the world by assigning meaning, structure, narrative. But what happens when you witness something that has no precedent, no category? Something so outside your schema that it threatens your sanity just by existing? Your brain protects itself. It erects a wall, a mental blind spot. The moment remains, frozen in your subconscious, wrapped in silence and darkness. The door is locked, but still there. Psychologists have long understood dissociation, the mind's ability to detach from unbearable emotion or experience. But the forgotten door phenomenon suggests an even subtler mechanism. A memory may not need to be painful to be dangerous. It may simply be incomprehensible. And that alone is enough for your psyche to shudder it behind walls. Ever walk into a room and forget why you went in? That's common. But have you ever had the deep sense that you're forgetting something more than just a task? Something ancient, critical, personal? That eerie pull of an unremembered truth? That's the echo of the forgotten door. Think about dreams that haunt you, but make no sense. Places you've never seen but feel like home. Faces that appear again and again in the corners of your sleep, or in crowds, or in memories that feel like they're not even yours. These may not be hallucinations. They may be fragments, shards from behind the door, trying to leak back through. One woman described a memory surfacing during a thunderstorm. She had a vivid flash, not a dream, but a sudden, unshakable image. She was standing in a white hallway lined with mirrors, but none showed her reflection. Instead, the mirrors showed scenes of her life, but distorted, twisted just slightly. She watched, frozen, as one mirror displayed her speaking with someone she'd never met, in a language she didn't know, and yet understood. Then, the memory vanished. She had no context, no explanation, only a shaking body and a mind humming with something she couldn't name. The phenomenon isn't just psychological. It echoes in neurological studies. The brain has regions that become hyperactive in the face of intense novelty, like the hippocampus and amygdala. But in moments of overwhelming cognitive dissonance, these regions may trigger a shut-off, a blanking protocol designed to preserve mental integrity, like a fuse blowing in a circuit. Some theorists believe these doors hide more than personal memory. They may conceal moments of contact, interactions with non-human intelligence, glimpses of higher dimensions, or even crossings into alternate realities. And the reason we don't remember them isn't because they didn't happen. It's because we couldn't handle what they meant. It's why so many near-death experiences feel fragmented, like broken glass recollected through fog. Why abductees and experiencers report memory loss, missing time, or sudden knowledge they can't explain. Maybe the phenomenon isn't just about shielding from trauma. Maybe it's shielding from truths we weren't ready to integrate. But here's the catch. The door doesn't stay locked forever. Some people report these buried memories resurfacing under extreme emotional stress, hypnosis, or altered states of consciousness. Others describe random triggers, a sound, a color, a face, that shatter the wall and flood the mind with the impossible. The experience is often jarring, terrifying, euphoric, but always unforgettable, like waking up inside a different version of your own life. There's a theory in metaphysics called threshold awareness. It suggests that certain truths are too big to be understood all at once. Instead, they must trickle in. Leaks in the subconscious, symbols in dreams, whispers in the quiet moments when the rational mind relaxes its grip. These whispers might be the door creaking, and once it opens, even a crack, you are changed. You begin to see patterns where there were none. You feel the world breathe in a way it never has. You notice coincidences that feel less like chance and more like choreography. The mind resists, but the door, once breached, starts bleeding through. Slowly, persistently, until the truth becomes impossible to ignore. But why does this matter? Because the forgotten door phenomenon tells us that we are more than what we remember, that our lives are haunted not just by regrets or loss, but by encounters, moments of immense meaning that were too alien to hold. And in every person walking the earth may lie a forgotten truth, a buried moment that would change everything, if only it were remembered. You may have stood at the edge of the universe once. You may have seen the face of something that lives between dimensions. You may have touched a version of yourself that never came to be. And your mind, with love, with fear, with desperate necessity, locked that moment behind the door. But doors, even the most carefully hidden ones, are meant to open. So, if you feel the strange pull of something just beyond memory, don't dismiss it. If a dream feels too real, if a silence feels too loud, if a part of you seems to remember something your mind denies, lean in. Because the truth might not be waiting to be discovered. It might be waiting to be remembered. And it's not behind you. It's behind the door. The drifting compass theory. Have you ever felt pulled towards something that didn't make sense? A place you've never been, but long to visit. A career path that seems illogical, but feels right. A person you've never met, yet miss as if they once mattered to you deeply. These sensations aren't just poetic. They're unsettlingly specific. They don't originate from memory, nor from reason. They come from somewhere deeper, somewhere buried in the core of your being. This is the drifting compass theory, the idea that your internal compass isn't just emotional or moral, it's dimensional. It doesn't always point north. Sometimes it points to places that don't yet exist. We've been taught that the inner compass is about right and wrong, about listening to your heart. But what if that compass is older than morality, older than this life? What if it's not just guiding you toward choices, but through dimensions? Because maybe what we call intuition is actually directionality, a vector pulling you through time and space towards something just beyond the veil, something waiting to happen, or something that once did, in another version of reality. Think about déjà vu, that sudden sense that you've lived this moment before, not similar, not metaphorical, exactly this: the lighting, the conversation, the emotion. Where does that come from? Your brain tries to rationalize it as misfired neurons, but what if it's your compass brushing up against an echo of an alternate you, one who took a different path? For a moment, your direction aligns and you feel the resonance, the overlap, a vibration between dimensions, and it doesn't stop there. Why are we drawn to certain places, even if they hold no logical meaning? Some people are called to the ocean with no understanding of why it calms them. Others feel a deep ache in the desert, or a sense of coming home in a city they've never stepped foot in. These aren't coincidences. These may be dimensional alignments, your compass tugging at realities you were meant to visit, or already have. You are not fixed in one timeline. You're a traveler wearing the illusion of stability. Every decision you make fractures reality into a million versions, but your compass doesn't forget those paths. It stores them, tracks them, and sometimes it steers you toward one of them, not to confuse you, but to show you that you are more than this one version of yourself. Let's go deeper. Have you ever felt certain of a future you couldn't possibly prove? A child saying they'll live by the sea when they grow up, despite being raised inland. An artist painting unfamiliar alien landscapes before they've ever seen them in dreams. A scientist obsessively working on theories that aren't yet understood. These compulsions may not be random. They may be coordinates, dimensional coordinates, etched into the soul, guiding them toward versions of reality not yet born. Maybe your compass is trying to show you the shape of your future, not as fate, but as potential, like a gravity well, pulling you toward the most authentic version of who you are, even if it hasn't happened yet. You don't recognize it, but you feel it. And when you don't listen, you drift. You lose that clarity, that sense of home you couldn't define, because you're no longer heading in the right dimensional direction. But here's where it gets strange. This compass doesn't just lead to joy. Sometimes it leads to heartbreak, to failure, to tragedy. And yet, afterward, you often hear people say, "I was meant to go through that." How do we explain that? How can your compass point toward pain, unless pain was a necessary portal? Unless your transformation required that version of the path to be unlocked? It suggests that your dimensional compass doesn't care about comfort. It's not moral, it's not emotional, it's attuned to purpose, evolution, alignment. It knows where you need to go, not to be safe, but to be real, to wake up, to remember what you came here for. Now consider this. People who survive near-death experiences often describe a feeling just before the event, an intuition, a pull, a certainty that something was about to change. It's not fear, it's clarity, as if their compass suddenly locked onto something beyond this world, a glimpse into another layer of the map, another plane. Even in grief, people report strange compass-like moments. A widow waking up with the overwhelming need to visit the park where her partner once sat, only to find a message carved into the bench she'd never seen before. Or a father following an unexplainable urge to turn down an old road where he finds an object his lost child had loved. These aren't coincidences. They are waypoints, breadcrumbs, proof that the compass is real and always active. And maybe it doesn't just lead you through this lifetime. Maybe it survives death. If your consciousness is energy, information traveling without end, then the compass could be your constant. The thing that survives the shift from one dimension to another, from life to death, from dream to waking, always pointing you toward the version of existence where your soul continues its work. You may not always understand the signals. The compass doesn't speak in words. It speaks in longings, in restlessness, in dreams you can't shake. It speaks when you're lost, when you're broken, when you're standing at the edge of everything you thought you were. It says, "This way, keep going." The mistake we make is ignoring it, rationalizing it. We call it just a feeling. We bury it beneath logic, beneath fear. But what if those feelings were the only true guidance you ever had? What if that strange pull, that gut instinct, that magnetic draw towards something absurd, is the map you forgot you had? It's not always grand. Sometimes the compass nudges you to a conversation that changes everything, to a book on a dusty shelf, to an alleyway where you meet someone who reroutes your life. It doesn't scream, it hums, quietly, persistently, waiting for you to listen. So, next time you feel lost, stop looking outward, close your eyes, breathe, and feel which direction your soul is pointing. It may not be forward, it may be sideways, diagonal, or in a place time hasn't yet unfolded, because your internal compass doesn't care about clocks. It follows truth, potential, vibration, and maybe, just maybe, the you that you're becoming is already out there, waiting. All you have to do is follow the pull. The frame bleed effect. What if the life you're living isn't entirely your own? What if, in every passing second, fragments of other timelines are bleeding into this one? Subtle, invisible, but undeniable. Feelings you can't explain. Memories that never happened. Deja vu so strong it stings. Welcome to the frame bleed effect. This theory suggests that our reality isn't a sealed container. It's porous. Every moment you live is not isolated, but surrounded by infinite neighboring timelines, versions of your life where something unfolded slightly differently. A word left unsaid. A step taken left instead of right. A single heartbeat's worth of difference. These aren't fantasy. They're possibilities running alongside your own, parallel but dangerously close. And sometimes, they bleed through. Imagine time as a film strip. Each frame represents a moment in your life. Now imagine there are countless versions of that film, each almost identical, but not quite. In one, you're still friends with someone you lost years ago. In another, you never took the job that changed your life. In yet another, you didn't survive the car crash. The frames all exist, playing beside each other in an infinite reel. Now imagine the borders between those reels aren't perfectly sealed. Imagine that, for milliseconds at a time, the edge of one frame smears into another. The result? You feel something real, intense, visceral. But it didn't happen here. Not in this version of your life. Have you ever had an overwhelming sense of loss, but nothing is missing? Or a sudden rush of joy tied to a memory you don't actually have? A vivid dream that felt more like a stolen memory than fantasy? These aren't glitches. These are leaks. The frame bleed effect says your mind isn't just a receiver of information. It's a finely tuned antenna, constantly syncing with the timeline you're currently anchored to. But because consciousness isn't bound to one frame forever, it occasionally brushes against others. And when it does, you catch glimpses, echoes, ghosts of other lives lived. It's not your imagination. It's the bleed. Let's talk about phantom emotions. You're walking home, and suddenly you feel grief. Deep, aching grief, for no reason. You look around. Nothing has changed. No bad news. No trigger. But your heart is heavy, like you've lost someone. And in another timeline, maybe you have. Maybe someone you love is gone. Maybe this is the version where they survived, but the emotional bleed came from the version where they didn't. Or maybe you wake up with your heart racing, tears on your face. You dreamt of holding someone you never met. You felt their warmth, their voice, their story. But you know they aren't real, except they are. In a frame next to yours, they exist. Maybe they're your partner. Maybe you lost them. Maybe you never met them in this world, but your mind crossed into a frame where you did. And now their absence echoes through your day, even though they were never part of your life here. Science offers us glimmers of how this might be possible. In quantum mechanics, particles exist in superpositions, multiple states at once, until measured. The act of observation collapses those possibilities into one. But what if human consciousness doesn't collapse the universe into one state? What if it's only ever riding a wave across the ocean of probability, never fully locked in, always drifting between shores? The many worlds interpretation of quantum theory suggests that every possible outcome of every moment happens, each in its own timeline, but those timelines aren't necessarily sealed off. They may exist close enough for information, emotional, cognitive, even sensory, to slip through under certain conditions. Extreme emotional states, altered consciousness, deep sleep, trauma, or near-death experiences might thin the membrane between frames. These are the moments when the bleed is most likely to occur. The moments when the mind forgets which version it belongs to, and sometimes The effect is so strong, it rewrites reality in small ways. You swear your keys were on the counter. You remember putting them there, but they're not. Later, they turn up in the freezer. You think you're losing your mind. But maybe you didn't misplace them. Maybe, for a few seconds, your consciousness drifted into a frame where you did something different, and when you returned, the keys were simply where they were in that other version. The Mandela effect is often cited as a mass example of this bleed, collective false memories, people remembering historical events, logos, or names differently. Entire groups of people recalling a reality that doesn't match the current one. Some call it poor memory. But what if it's a group sync with a nearby frame? What if millions of minds briefly tuned into a version of reality where Nelson Mandela died in prison? Where the Berenstain Bears were spelled differently? Where entire events unfolded on a different timeline? That's not just misremembering. That's evidence of overlap. The frame bleed effect could also explain intuition, those moments when you just know something's about to happen. Maybe you've already lived it, in another version. Maybe the bleed allowed the feeling to pass through. The knowledge isn't coming from nowhere. It's leaking from a frame where the event already happened. Or consider reverse déjà vu when you're doing something for the first time, but it feels like a memory fading even as it's happening. That eerie sensation of losing something the moment you gain it. Maybe it's because you are finally syncing with the version of yourself that's already done it. But if this effect is real, why don't we all experience it constantly? Because your mind has a firewall. A built-in filter designed to keep you rooted in one stream of time. The self needs continuity to function. Too much bleed and your sense of identity would fracture. You'd become unmoored, lost between versions, but cracks appear. Moments of intense loss, heightened emotion, dream states, trauma, meditation. These are the times when your firewall weakens and the bleed slips in. It's not a malfunction. It's a feature of being human. Consciousness isn't static. It's dynamic. And sometimes it stretches into places it was never meant to go. But what does this mean for your life now? It means you are more than what has happened to you. You are a mosaic of what almost happened. A song composed not just of played notes, but of silent chords from other versions. The pain you feel may be older than this reality. The joy you carry may come from a life you haven't lived here. And the dreams you chase may not be fantasies, but memories bleeding through from a frame where you already achieved them. So, next time you feel like you're not fully here, like something is missing, or something extra is clinging to you, don't dismiss it. You might be brushing against the edge of another you, a different path, a different fate, still warm, still echoing. And if you listen closely, you just might hear your other self calling back, because every version of you bleeds just a little. And sometimes, the bleed is enough to change everything. The chain of wills hypothesis. What if your deepest goal, your most burning ambition, isn't truly yours? What if that sense of purpose you feel so strongly is not original, not born from your experiences or shaped by your upbringing, but inherited, an echo of someone else's mission? Not your parents' expectations, not society's influence, but something far older. A will passed down like a chain, from soul to soul, consciousness to consciousness, carrying out a task that has no clear origin, only direction. This is the chain of wills hypothesis, a chilling and compelling idea that your life might be a continuation of a goal set into motion long before you ever existed. We've all felt it, that uncanny pull towards something we can't explain, a dream that doesn't make sense, a calling that doesn't align with our current life, a hunger for impact that feels too intense to be just personal. Maybe you've tried to ignore it, rationalize it, suppress it, but it always returns, subtle but powerful. As if your very bones remember a task you've never consciously been given. What if this is not coincidence? What if it's memory, but not your memory? What if it's the lingering echo of a will so old that it has outlived bodies, eras, even civilizations? The chain of wills hypothesis proposes that across time, certain intentions, powerful, unresolved, unfinished, become untethered from their original creators and seek new vessels, humans. Not randomly, but precisely. Chosen by resonance, a match in frequency, psychology, even genetic lineage. The will finds the person who can carry it further. Think of it like a cosmic relay race. One person dreams of ending suffering, but dies before they can act. That desire doesn't vanish, it lingers. It attaches to someone receptive, someone born perhaps generations later, who finds themselves inexplicably drawn to humanitarian work, unable to explain the urgency they feel. Or take the artist who paints obsessively, haunted by visions they don't understand, visions of structures, symbols, or myths from a time they have never studied. Their hand moves, but the will is not entirely theirs. And this phenomenon is not just poetic. There are real-world examples that suggest something deeper might be at play. Take the case of children who spontaneously recall past lives, describing professions, people, and even languages they have never encountered. Or consider the inexplicable emergence of savant talents, people who, after a head injury or trauma, can suddenly compose complex symphonies or solve advanced equations. Are these anomalies? Or are they activations, points where the inherited will fully connects? Look at history's most driven figures. Joan of Arc, a teenage peasant girl, suddenly claims she must lead armies. Nikola Tesla, consumed by visions of future technology that seemingly download into his mind. Malala Yousafzai, defying death itself to continue a fight for education. These are not ordinary goals, these are obsessions. An obsession, in its purest form, may not come from within. It may be the echo of an ancient fire relit. There's also a darker side to this hypothesis. Because not all wills are noble. Some may be driven by vengeance, by conquest, by fear. A dictator rises, possessed by an unquenchable thirst for domination, carrying the unfulfilled desires of fallen emperors. A cult leader feels chosen, echoing ancient zealots who believed they too were fulfilling divine purpose. If wills can pass through time, then their moral weight does not disappear. It compounds, and it corrupts as easily as it inspires. But here's the most haunting question of all. If your will is not your own, who are you? What is identity if it's built on the scaffolding of another's dream? Are we autonomous beings, or are we carriers, vessels through which ancient hopes, failures, and visions find form again? Modern science is only beginning to understand how memories and traumas pass through generations. Epigenetics shows that stress, addiction, and even emotions can alter DNA and be inherited. But what if it's not just biology? What if consciousness itself is capable of inheritance, not just memories, but intention? What if your yearning is the residue of someone else's heartbreak? Imagine a civilization destroyed by war, its scholars wiped out, its leaders lost. But one survivor, before dying, burns a single idea into the quantum field. Let this never happen again. That will, untethered by body or time, waits for centuries. And then, one day, it finds a mind capable of feeling it again. A child born into a different world, suddenly driven to pursue diplomacy, peace-building, unification. That child doesn't remember the war, but something in them does. This hypothesis also explains the strange synchronicities in the lives of visionaries, why breakthroughs happen in clusters, why inventions emerge simultaneously in different parts of the world. Perhaps these individuals are not rivals, but links in the same chain, each receiving fragments of the same ancient mission, interpreting it differently based on their environment, but all driven by the same echo. It also makes sense of that feeling we sometimes get, that we were born in the wrong time, or that we're meant for something we can't yet name. Maybe we're not lost. Maybe we're just mid-transmission. But here's the paradox. While the will may not originate with you, what you do with it is entirely yours. You have agency. You have choice. You are not doomed to fulfill someone else's destiny blindly. You can question the whisper. You can reshape the will. And in doing so, you become more than a vessel. You become a co-creator, the link in the chain that bends the pattern forward or breaks it entirely. That's the ultimate responsibility, because your goals, your visions, your obsessions, they may not start with you, but they will end with you, either fulfilled, transformed, or forgotten. The chain can continue or collapse, and in that moment, you are more powerful than the ancient voices that called you. You are the one who decides if their echo becomes action, or if the silence returns. So, the next time you feel a calling you can't explain, a dream that won't let you go, a mission that haunts you, don't dismiss it. Listen, question it, trace it. Is it yours? Or are you part of something far older, far deeper, far more beautiful or dangerous than you imagined? Because maybe just maybe, your life is not only about you. Maybe you're the next bearer of a will that refuses to die. And what you do next might echo for centuries. The spiral mind map. What if everything we thought we knew about memory was wrong? What if the brain doesn't store thoughts like files in a cabinet or lines in a ledger, but like echoes in a spiral, repeating, evolving, folding back on themselves? Imagine that your deepest memories, your core self, aren't stored at the surface, but buried deep beneath layers of repetition, slowly compressed into the center of a vortex you can only reach when the right emotion or trigger unlocks the path. This is the spiral mind map, a theory that challenges everything about how we understand memory, identity, and consciousness. We tend to imagine memory as linear, one thing after another: childhood, school, love, heartbreak, success, a timeline. But timelines are fragile. They break. They get distorted. They decay. And yet, somehow, the brain doesn't lose everything. Somehow, things we haven't thought about in decades come flooding back with perfect clarity when we smell something familiar or hear a specific sound. How? Why? What kind of architecture allows forgotten moments to survive, buried under years of life? The spiral mind map suggests that the brain organizes thought like a spiral staircase, not just upward or downward, but inward. Each step isn't a new floor, but a deeper rotation. We revisit the same ideas, feelings, questions again and again, but each time we're seeing them from a slightly different angle, a slightly deeper level. And the oldest, most fundamental memories, the ones that shaped who you are, sit at the center, protected beneath layer after layer of encoded repetition. This explains why trauma resurfaces decades later. A person who thought they moved on suddenly breaks down at a song they haven't heard since childhood. It's not that the memory disappeared, it was spiraling inward, waiting for the right frequency, emotional or sensory, to reach it again. And once it does, the spiral unwinds, pulling that core memory back to the surface like a storm from the deep. Think of how you revisit the same problems over and over, not just in life, but in thought. You think you've conquered self-doubt, only for it to resurface years later, wearing a different face. That's not failure. It's the spiral pulling you back to the same point, but from a different elevation. The mind doesn't deal with things once. It loops. It revisits. Not an error, but by design. Because growth isn't linear, it's rotational. And understanding only comes when you've seen the same truth enough times to finally decode it from all directions. Dreams provide another clue. We dream in symbols, not narratives. We dream in repetitions. Clocks, staircases, doors, loops. Ever wonder why people often dream of falling, climbing, or being stuck in endless corridors? These aren't just random fears, they're metaphors for the spiral map. The brain trying to navigate through layers it cannot consciously access. Even obsession fits the model. When we fixate on something, an idea, a person, a failure, it's often because our spiral has locked into a tight loop. We're stuck on the outer coil, unable to descend to the deeper insight beneath it. We replay conversations, rewrite events in our mind, analyze from every angle, because instinctively, we know there's something deeper we haven't reached yet, something at the center. But here's where it gets unsettling. Some people never reach the center of their spiral. They orbit endlessly, trapped in repeating behaviors, reliving the same mistakes, reacting to triggers that were formed in childhood or even earlier. They think they're evolving, but they're walking in circles. Because the spiral doesn't guarantee growth. It only offers the map. You have to choose to descend, to dig, to remember. And remembering is painful. The closer you get to the core, the more intense the emotional resistance becomes. This is why we bury certain memories so deeply, because they sit at the heart of who we are. Unraveling them would require facing everything we built on top of them: identity, beliefs, relationships, safety. But true healing isn't forgetting. It's unwinding the spiral and confronting what you've hidden from yourself. That is the work of a lifetime. Consider how musicians return to the same themes in their work, how writers explore the same ideas in different stories, how artists paint the same archetypes over and over, unconsciously. This is the spiral in action. Creative minds tapping into the same inner well, again and again, each time drawing closer to something wordless, something primal, the center. Even neuroscience gives hints. Brain scans show that memory retrieval, activates not just one area, but patterns, complex loops across the hippocampus, prefrontal cortex, and deeper structures. Memory isn't pulled like a file, it's reconstructed, rebuilt each time, as if the brain has to spiral inward, layer by layer, to retrieve the full emotional and sensory context of a moment. It also explains false memories, because spirals can cross. Your current emotions can contaminate older loops, creating distortions that feel real but aren't. This isn't weakness. It's how the spiral handles complexity. It weaves new threads into old ones, which is why memory is never fixed. It's alive, shifting, spiraling. So what does this mean for us? It means self-discovery is a process of descent. You're not moving forward to find yourself. You're moving inward. Every moment of reflection, every bout of confusion, every emotional outburst, it's all part of the spiral, pulling you back to something essential. Something you forgot, not because it was unimportant, but because it was too important to hold all at once. And here's the haunting part. The spiral mind map suggests that there are memories you've never accessed. Not because they didn't happen, but because you haven't reached their layer yet. Your future self may unlock a moment from age 4 that changes how you see everything. A smile, a lie, a touch. Buried for decades, waiting to re-emerge when you're ready. And until that happens, you'll feel the echo. The itch of something just out of reach. The sense that something inside you remains unexplored. But that's the beauty of the spiral. It promises that nothing is ever truly lost. Every thought, every feeling, every version of you still lives at some point along the coil. And if you're brave enough to descend, if you're willing to face what's buried, you may find that the person you're trying to become has been waiting at the center all along. So the next time you feel like you're going in circles, stop. Listen, you may not be stuck. You may just be spiraling in, closer, deeper, into the heart of who you really are. The memory lock mechanism. What if your deepest pain isn't just emotional or psychological, but quantum? What if every trauma you've ever experienced doesn't simply scar the mind, but alters reality at its most fundamental level? A wound that doesn't just echo through memory, but crystallizes into a lock, a quantum lock. Not a lock you force open, not one that breaks with time or effort, but one that only opens when the exact internal combination is remembered, not by logic, but by presence. By inner truth. This is the memory lock mechanism, a radical hypothesis that suggests trauma doesn't block you from healing. It's the blueprint for how to. We usually think of trauma as something broken, a rupture in the psyche, a jagged edge of experience we try to smooth over with therapy, medication, distraction. But what if trauma is not brokenness? What if it's a design? A lock, precisely crafted, waiting for the right awareness to fit its code. Think of it like this. When trauma happens, whether it's a betrayal, a loss, or violence, the mind reacts, yes, but so does something deeper, a vibration, a shift, as if the trauma imprints itself not just in neurons, but in the quantum field around you. A moment of impact so intense that it causes reality itself to contract around the memory, like a safe closing shut, not to punish you, but to protect what's inside. Because inside the trauma is not only pain, it's power, the raw, original energy of who you were before the wound. And the only way to access it again is not by erasing the trauma, but by unlocking it. Not by forcing it open from the outside, but by finding the exact internal alignment that opens it from within. This isn't just philosophy. Quantum biology shows that the body responds to trauma at the subatomic level. Particles that make up your cells don't just behave mechanically. They behave according to fields of probability, sensitivity, and observation. They are shaped by what you feel, what you focus on, what you suppress. Trauma may very well alter your internal quantum states, locking down certain frequencies of memory, emotion, and potential. And this is why healing feels so impossible sometimes. Because you can't brute force a quantum system. You can't yell it open. You can't reason your way into it. You have to listen. You have to learn. Because every lock, by definition, has a combination. And your trauma is no different. Let's take an example. A man experiences betrayal early in life. He grows up with trust issues, intimacy blocks, self-doubt. Traditional therapy helps, up to a point, but he keeps hitting a wall. That wall is the lock, and he keeps trying to fix it from the outside. But one day in silence, maybe during meditation, maybe while walking alone, maybe after a breakdown, he suddenly remembers something not from his mind, but from his body. A fragment of the betrayal, yes, but also something else. A feeling he had before it happened. An openness. A belief in love so pure it makes him weep. That was the combination. The moment of remembrance, not of pain, but of what was lost before the pain. And as that memory returns, not mentally but energetically, something shifts, the lock clicks, and he doesn't just feel healed, he feels returned. That's the nature of the memory lock. It's not there to punish you. It's there to ensure that only the authentic version of you, the version who's done the work, who's remembered the truth, can access the power behind the pain, because every trauma hides a forgotten self, a version of you frozen in that moment. And healing is not about deleting the memory. It's about going back into the vault, not to relive the pain, but to retrieve the part of you that never stopped believing before the wound happened. This is why trauma keeps looping, why triggers happen, why you feel stuck in patterns you can't escape. Because the quantum lock isn't just holding memory, it's holding energy. And until you align with the frequency of that original self, the lock won't open. It's also why healing is so unique to each person. There is no universal key, no 7-step system. Your lock is yours alone, but so is the combination. And it's not outside of you. It's in the dreams you keep having, the places your body tenses without reason, the songs that make you cry, the hobbies you abandoned, the fears that whisper at night. These are not coincidences. These are clues, markers of the combination trying to be remembered. Let's take this deeper. If the memory lock is real, if trauma is encoded in the quantum fabric of your being, then healing isn't an upward path. It's a downward spiral, a descent, not into despair, but into precision. Each time you face the pain, you get closer. Each tear, each silence, each realization, it's not weakness. It's calibration. You are not becoming someone new. You are aligning with someone ancient, yourself, before the wound. And when you do, when the combination is felt, not thought, the lock opens, and you reclaim not just peace, but presence, not just closure, but power. You reclaim the part of you that was locked away not out of cruelty, but preservation. And here's what no one tells you. When one lock opens, it sends ripples through your entire system. Other memories begin to shift. Other wounds begin to soften. Because your body recognizes the pattern. It learns the language of unlocking, and healing becomes exponential. But here's the most haunting part of the memory lock mechanism. Sometimes, the combination isn't just yours. It may come through another person. A stranger who sees you with eyes of compassion. A friend who says something simple but true. A child who mirrors your own pain back to you. The universe is always trying to help you remember. It surrounds you with mirrors, fragments, patterns, not to torment you, but to guide you. And when the combination clicks, when the lock dissolves, it's not just you who heals. Time itself heals, because the version of you that was frozen in that trauma is no longer stuck. The memory stops replaying. The fear stops controlling. And you, the observer, the traveler, the alchemist, you become free. So the next time you feel broken, stuck, trapped, don't ask, how do I fix this? Ask instead, what is the combination I've forgotten? What part of me is still locked inside this pain? Then get quiet. Listen. Follow the clues. Because the vault doesn't want to stay closed. It wants to be opened. It's waiting for you. Not to overpower it, but to remember the exact truth you carried in your heart before the world tried to take it. Because you are not just the trauma. You are the key. And once you remember the combination, you'll realize the lock was never stronger than you. The event spark theory. The biggest events in your life, the ones that defined who you are, changed everything, broke or built you, may not have begun the way you think they did. They weren't triggered by grand gestures, massive decisions, or epic turning points. According to the event spark theory, every life-altering moment may actually begin with something almost invisible, a spark, a glance, a pause that lingered too long, a second that didn't mean anything at the time, but meant everything. We're trained to look for meaning in the obvious: the first kiss, the job offer, the diagnosis, the goodbye. We pinpoint these as beginnings, assuming the story starts there. But the event spark theory suggests that the origin of those stories goes much deeper and starts much earlier, that a single fleeting, unnoticed moment may ignite a chain reaction so subtle that you never realize you're in motion until the world is already burning or blooming. Imagine this. You're sitting in a coffee shop. You glance up. A stranger is looking your way. Just a glance, half a second. You look away. You don't think about it again. But that moment sets something in motion. Maybe that person becomes your future partner. Maybe they don't speak to you today, but they remember you, and your paths cross again years later. Maybe your glance made them change their plans. Maybe it stopped them from doing something drastic. Maybe it planted a seed that bloomed in a completely different life that somehow, someday, loops back into yours. You didn't feel anything special. It was just a moment. But the event spark theory tells us that was the origin point. We rarely recognize sparks when they happen. That's what makes them so powerful and so dangerous. Because when something major occurs, we often assume it was destiny or randomness, or a single decision we can identify. But what if it all began with something so small you never even knew it happened? Think of your most life-defining event. Now rewind. Go back further. Not to the day it happened, not to the week before. Keep going. Back to the unremarkable moment that let the real event take shape. Maybe the breakup started not with a fight, but with a silence. An evening where one of you didn't ask how the other was. Maybe the illness was discovered after a checkup triggered by an article you only read because your bus was late. Maybe the job that saved you came from a friend you met at a party you weren't even planning to attend, until your plans changed last minute. These are the sparks. They are the invisible architecture of fate, and what makes them even more haunting is how fragile they are. Miss 1 second, one beat, and the chain might never ignite. It's like striking a match in the wind. One breath the wrong way, and the future changes. Forever. There's a man who once missed his train by 3 minutes. He cursed, frustrated, thinking it ruined his day. But that delay caused him to meet a woman at the station bar. They talked. They married. Had children. Built a life. Years later, he traced everything. His family, his happiness, his entire identity, back to missing that train. That was the event. But the spark? A slow walk. 1 second spent tying a shoelace. The event spark theory is not just about destiny, it's about awareness. It tells us we're surrounded by flammable potential at all times, that the most important decisions you ever make might be happening when you don't even know you're making them. And that's both terrifying and beautiful, because it means life isn't just shaped by what we plan, it's shaped by what we feel, glimpse, delay, or choose in whispers. Sometimes, the spark is emotional, a gut feeling you ignore, a flicker of intuition you brush aside, the person you didn't text back, the apology you held in. These things may seem small, but under the right conditions, they become ignition points, and once lit, the fire runs fast. Science shows us that complex systems, like human life, relationships, even memory, are highly sensitive to initial conditions. Chaos theory calls it the butterfly effect. But event spark theory goes even more granular. It says, the butterfly doesn't even have to flap its wings. Just existing near the breeze can be enough. Think about how many alternate lives you've already escaped or bypassed, just by a second's difference. The car you almost got into, the call you almost answered, the stranger you almost spoke to. Somewhere in that almost is an entire version of you that never happened. And that absence, the life not lived, is just as much a part of your story as the one you're walking now. Even trauma, in this theory, has a spark, a moment of exposure, vulnerability, trust, maybe a second where you let your guard down, or someone else did. The tragedy didn't start with impact. It started with a spark, a second that could have gone differently, but didn't. So what does this mean for how we live? It means we must begin to respect the moments that feel meaningless, the seconds that pass uncelebrated, because any of them might be the start of everything. That glance you just gave a stranger, that delay before you speak, that feeling you chose not to voice. These are not empty moments. They are flint, waiting for friction. It also means we can start over. anywhere. Because if a life-changing event can begin from nothing, then so can a life-saving one. You don't need a big break. You need a spark, a moment of courage, a question asked, a hand extended, a step taken when everything in you says, stand still. You may not know what that spark will light, but the universe does. There's a strange power in that uncertainty, a deep responsibility. Because once you understand the event spark theory, you realize that you're not waiting for destiny to arrive. You're already writing it. With every unnoticed second you spend awake, your future isn't waiting at the next big milestone. It's waiting in the next breath, the next blink, the next pause before you act. So pause deliberately, glance bravely, speak carefully, because the spark doesn't care if you're ready. It only cares that you're there. And one day when the fire takes shape, when the life-defining event arrives, you'll look back and try to find where it all began. And maybe, just maybe, you'll remember a second, a glance, a breath, and you'll know that was the spark. The Darkside reflection thought. Every time you made the right choice, every time you turned down the temptation, walked away from destruction, swallowed your anger instead of unleashing it, something happened that you couldn't see. Something didn't just fail to occur. It split off. A version of you, forged in that one moment of potential darkness, didn't vanish. It lingered. Not as a memory, but as a shadow. A silent echo that never got to live, but never fully died either. This is the Darkside reflection thought. The idea that who you could have been, if you had taken every bad path, still exists, just outside your timeline, and maybe influencing you in reverse. It's not just about regret. It's not about guilt or shame. This is something deeper, something stranger. It's the haunting theory that every avoided mistake still ripples through your existence, not as a ghost, but as a gravitational pull. Every version of you that spiraled out in an alternate outcome is still there, watching, pushing, nudging, shaping who you are from the mirror's other side. You know the feeling. You're walking home at night and suddenly feel watched, not by someone else, but by some version of yourself you can't quite name. Or you stare into the bathroom mirror longer than usual and feel a flicker of unease, like the person staring back could choose differently than you do, like the space between you and them is thinner than it should be. It's not imagination, it's the echo. Every time you chose compassion over cruelty, there was a version of you that didn't. Every time you walked away from betrayal, addiction, manipulation, there was another you that leaned in. And they didn't just dissolve, they grew in another timeline, another branch. And the theory suggests that these alternate selves, these Darkside reflections, form a shadow network around your consciousness, not to harm you, but to pressure you, to remind you, in reverse, of who you don't want to become. Because here's the strange truth. You are not solely shaped by your choices. You are also shaped by your near misses, by the things you almost did, the people you almost became, and in some unknown quantum architecture of the soul, those almosts gain weight. They act as counterbalances, dim gravitational wells that tug gently on your current path, unseen but felt. This is why some people seem to carry a darkness that doesn't match their life story, a persistent sadness or aggression they can't explain. It may not come from what happened, but from what almost happened. The alternate self pressing against the walls of their mind, trying to re-enter through cracks of doubt and fatigue. It's not possession, it's proximity. Imagine your consciousness as a ship sailing through fog, surrounded by versions of yourself that nearly took the wheel, each one cast in shadow, made of all the decisions you never made. But they are not dormant. They whisper. They lean in during moments of crisis, sometimes to sabotage, sometimes to warn. Because even your darker selves remember what it was to be you, and they know the weight of what you left behind. Think of the moments you suddenly felt disgusted by your own thoughts, a flash of violent imagery, a cruel impulse, a desire to destroy something just because you could. You didn't act on it, but it wasn't random. It may have been a flare from your Darkside reflection, bleeding through, reminding you of the version of yourself that would have done it. This isn't meant to frighten you, it's meant to awaken you, because the Darkside reflection theory suggests a radical form of self-awareness. That morality isn't just a list of right choices, It's a daily confrontation with infinite possible selves, and every decision you make isn't just what you become, it's what you refuse to become. You don't just build a life, you hold back 100 darker ones. It also means redemption runs deeper than we think. Because if every bad choice you didn't make still echoes, then every good one you didn't take must echo too. Somewhere, there's a version of you who was braver, kinder, wiser, and maybe they are trying to influence you in return. You are caught between reflections, some pulling you backward, some forward, and you feel it every time you're torn between what's easy and what's right. This is why the hardest battles are the quiet ones. Not the moments of outward crisis, but the silent debates inside your mind. Should you call that person back? Should you tell that lie? Should you hurt someone just a little to feel powerful for once? In those moments, the pressure you feel isn't just internal, it's interdimensional. It's the push and pull of what you could have been, trying to reclaim you. And sometimes, we slip. Sometimes we do follow the shadow. We hurt people. We betray our better judgment. And for a while it feels like falling, like you're no longer yourself. Because maybe you aren't. Maybe the dark side version of you stepped forward, took over, lived through you, for a moment. But when you return, when you feel shame, regret, or resolve, that's you reclaiming the wheel. That's your original self pushing the darkness back into the spiral, and that matters. Because the fact that you feel the wrongness means your compass still works. Your soul still knows where home is. You haven't lost yourself. You've just wandered near the edge. And even the darkest reflections lose power when exposed to awareness. So what do we do with this theory? Do we fear it? Do we deny it? No. We use it. Next time you feel the pull of a bad decision, stop. Listen. Feel who's whispering. And instead of running, name it. Say, I see you. I remember you. But I am not you. That simple act of conscious recognition sends a signal through the spiral, telling all your dark reflections that you're still here, still choosing, still building the better version. And over time, something strange happens. The darkness stops pulling. It starts teaching. You begin to understand why it exists. Not to destroy you, but to define your edges. To show you the contrast. To give you something to transcend. Because maybe the ultimate purpose of the shadow is to remind the light of its strength. And if that's true, then every bad choice you didn't take wasn't just avoidance, it was transformation. Every time you didn't betray, didn't lie, didn't give in to hate, you weren't just being good. You were shaping the boundary between you and the 1,000 versions of you that could have taken your place. You are more than your light. You are more than your dark. You are the fragile space in between where choices are made. And in that space, every second, you are remaking the world. The room that doesn't exist. Yet. There's a room in your future you've never seen. You've never heard of it, never imagined it. It isn't in your plans, your calendar, your 5-year goals. And yet, it's there, waiting. Silent, invisible. A space constructed from the choices you haven't made yet, shaped by the paths you haven't walked, and it holds within it a moment so profound that everything in your life, before and after, will be split into before that room, and after it. This is not fantasy. This is the room that doesn't exist. Yet. A concept that sounds surreal. But when you listen closely, it feels hauntingly familiar. It's the echo you can't place. The sense that something is coming. Something that will change everything. But you don't know what. You just know it's real. We often think of the future as a straight line, a progression of days filled with predictable events, peppered with hopes, dreams, occasional surprises. But what if that's a lie we tell ourselves to stay sane? What if, instead, the future is a maze of rooms, constantly shifting based on our thoughts, feelings, and actions, each room waiting like a hidden checkpoint in a game we don't know we're playing? And among those rooms, one stands alone. This room doesn't exist yet, not because it's far away, but because it only forms when you are ready to meet it. It's not created by time, it's created by transformation. Imagine this. You wake up on an ordinary day. Maybe it starts like any other. Coffee, scrolling, work. But something feels slightly off. A conversation takes a strange turn, a phone call you weren't expecting, a door you pass that you've somehow never noticed before. And then, Without drama, without warning, you're in it. The room. Maybe it's literal, maybe it's metaphorical, but you feel it. You stepped into a space where your life will never be the same. It could be the moment you meet someone who will unravel everything you thought love was. Or a hospital room where you hear a diagnosis that rewrites your identity in seconds. Or an art studio where you paint for the first time and feel something ancient come alive. It might be a courtroom, a funeral home, a delivery room, a train station. It doesn't matter what's in the room. What matters is what it unlocks, because this room doesn't contain safety. It contains truth, and truth does not come softly. In that moment, the old version of you will begin to fall away. The one that believed certain things were forever. The one that assumed control, comfort, or clarity. That version will tremble, because the room asks you to choose, evolve, or retreat. That's why most people don't even recognize the room when they enter. They pass through it, thinking it was just another day, another coincidence, another loss or gain. But for a few, the ones who are listening, the room explodes their narrative, not with violence, but with realization. Let me give you an example. A woman walks into a bookstore one rainy afternoon. She wasn't planning to be there. Her car broke down. Her phone's dead. She's killing time. She wanders to a shelf she wouldn't normally browse, pulls out a book with a strange title, flips to a random page, and reads something that cracks open her entire world view. Words that seem written for her. A sentence that dissolves decades of pain in seconds. She buys the book, reads it that night, and by morning, she's made a decision. She's quitting the job that's been draining her soul for years. She's finally moving to the city she dreams about in secret. That bookstore wasn't just a building, it was the room. Or consider the young man who's always lived in fear. Generational trauma, silence, anxiety. He never speaks in class. Always feels like a background character in his own story. But one day, after a panic attack, he walks into a therapist's office. He doesn't want to go. He's terrified. But he goes. And there, amid tissues and silence and the weight of everything unsaid, he finds the courage to speak, to tell the truth, to shatter a cycle. That session was the room that doesn't exist, yet is real, not because you can see it, but because it's shaping you from the future. It's already influencing your choices. It whispers through intuition, déjà vu, gut feelings. It guides you, not with maps, but with momentum. But here's the terrifying part. Not everyone finds the room. Some people spend their entire lives circling it, close, but never quite entering. Fear keeps them outside. Numbness keeps them distracted. Routine keeps them blind. The room cannot be forced open. It reveals itself only when you are cracked enough to receive it. So, how do you find it? You don't. You allow it. You live fully. You feel deeply. You take the step that terrifies you, not because it's safe, but because something in you demands it. The room appears not through logic, but through alignment. It is not summoned by plans, it is summoned by truth. And once you enter, you will never return to who you were, because the room is a mirror. It reflects the person you've always been becoming. It doesn't hand you answers, it hands you yourself. Stripped, raw, untangled. And from that place, you build again. This time, from honesty. But there's a secret no one tells you. There may be more than one, because the future isn't static. It is a branching reality. Every brave choice plants the seed of another room. Every act of awareness shifts the architecture. And some rooms are darker than others. A jail cell can be a room. So can a rehab center. So can a confession booth. Some rooms break you, but even in breaking, they bring you closer to what is real. And in that sense, the room that doesn't exist yet is both a destination and a creation. You don't just walk into it, you become it. Every time you choose truth over comfort, the door creaks open. Every time you say what you mean instead of what's safe, the light shifts. Every time you follow the strange urge, the offbeat path, the unexplainable pull, you're building the doorway. And one day, you'll arrive. Not because you were lucky, but because you were ready. And in that room, you will remember who you are. Not the name, not the job, not the trauma, but the being beneath it all, the one who's been trying to wake you up, calling you forward, building a future not made of control, but of becoming. The room is coming, and once you enter, nothing will ever be the same again. The bubble awareness hypothesis. What if your consciousness, your sense of self, your thoughts, your memories, isn't the whole picture, but just one isolated bubble in a vast foaming sea of awareness? What if your mind, as separate and singular as it feels, occasionally brushes against other minds, not in waking life, but in sleep, when the walls are thin and the tides of thought swell? This is the bubble awareness hypothesis. And once you glimpse what it implies, you may never see your own thoughts the same way again. Imagine a sea of soap bubbles, each one its own fragile sphere of perception. Inside one bubble is you, your identity, your language, your fears and hopes. Floating beside you are billions of others, each containing another human experience. But you're not locked away in a vacuum. The surface of your bubble isn't solid. It's fluid, flexible. And under the right conditions, deep sleep, intense emotion, altered states, it stretches thin enough to brush against the surface of another. In those moments, something passes through. A fragment. A feeling. A foreign thought. Maybe it arrives in a dream. Maybe it enters your mind like a sudden intuition or an image that doesn't belong to anything you remember. But it's real. It has weight. And it didn't come from you. Not originally. We like to believe that our minds are self-contained, sealed environments, impenetrable by others. But the bubble awareness hypothesis argues the opposite, that consciousness is a communal medium broken into momentary selves, each experiencing life from a slightly different vantage point. These selves, or bubbles, move in a chaotic dance. Sometimes they collide, sometimes they merge, and in those rare contacts, we glimpse what it is to not be alone in our thoughts. Have you ever had a dream so vivid, so emotionally intense, that it felt like you were living someone else's life? Waking up with memories that weren't yours, a love for someone you've never met, grief for a loss that never happened in your world. These aren't just dreams. They might be bleed-throughs, intersections where two awareness bubbles touched, and you carried something back from the contact. Children report this most frequently. They wake up sobbing, describing places and people their parents swear they've never seen. Some say it's just imagination. But what if children, still raw and unfiltered, are just more sensitive to the foam, more likely to slip between bubbles? Even in adulthood, the signs are there. Think of spontaneous empathy, the moment you walk into a room and feel the mood shift before anyone speaks. Think of synchronicity, two people thinking the same thought, finishing each other's sentences. Not coincidence, but temporary entanglement. Two bubbles brushing long enough to share a ripple. This idea isn't purely mystical. In theoretical physics, space-time is not a smooth, continuous field. At quantum scales, it may resemble foam, frothy and chaotic, composed of tiny, bubbling fluctuations. If space and time themselves behave this way, why wouldn't consciousness mirror the same structure? Our minds could be quantum bubbles, rising from a deeper sea of awareness we've barely begun to perceive. Sleep becomes the portal. When you sleep, the neural structures that enforce ego boundaries dissolve. The rational mind softens. The walls between you and the world thin. In this state, your bubble stretches and wobbles, floating into contact with others. That's when the crosstalk begins. A woman dreams of drowning in a flood. Terrifying, visceral, unforgettable. She wakes up rattled. Thousands of miles away, a man dreams of causing a flood, pulling a lever in a dam he doesn't recognize. Neither knows the other. But their dreams were born of the same moment, their bubbles brushing in the night, or take shared dreams. Couples, friends, even strangers have reported waking from the same dream. Identical scenes, overlapping timelines, impossible coincidences. The bubble awareness hypothesis doesn't just allow for this, it expects it. When enough minds float close in sleep, their boundaries dissolve into shared experience. Not telepathy, not fantasy, contact. And what about the persistent sense of other in certain dreams? The observer, the stranger, the voice that speaks to you with knowledge you don't have. Some say it's the subconscious, but maybe it's not you at all. Maybe it's someone else, reaching out from their own bubble, accidentally drifting through yours. Some neuroscientists are beginning to question the strict boundary of consciousness. Studies on group meditation, collective trance, and synchronized dreaming suggest that multiple minds can, under the right conditions, enter coherent states, shared mental patterns that imply a deeper connection. Could this be the moment when bubbles merge, even temporarily? If this theory is true, then you've already touched thousands of minds in your lifetime, and been touched by them. Most of those moments slipped past unnoticed, filtered out by waking awareness, but some left marks. The stray thought that won't leave you. The face that feels like home, even though you've never seen it. The fear that comes from nowhere, like a warning meant for someone else. The bubble awareness hypothesis also challenges how we think of individuality. If you are just one perspective in a vast, foaming sea of perspectives, then your sense of isolation is an illusion. You are not alone in the void. You are surrounded always by the electric hum of other minds, just a breath away. The solitude you feel is just the curve of the bubble. Inside, you are you, but outside is all of us. This theory also opens questions we're not ready to answer. Could trauma pass between bubbles? Could joy? Could memories, fears, or love drift across when the conditions align? What if your strongest emotions are not entirely your own? What if you're grieving a loss that belongs to someone you'll never meet? The implications are staggering. It means dreams may not be private hallucinations, but borderlands, meeting grounds where consciousness intersects. It means empathy is not metaphorical, but literal, an emotional resonance from minds brushing in subtle contact. It means the universe isn't just physical, it's intimately aware, down to its smallest bubble. And it means that every night, when you close your eyes, you set sail into the foam. You drift, you shift, you shimmer, and sometimes you touch. So the next time you dream of someone you've never known, or wake with a thought that feels foreign but familiar, don't dismiss it. It might be the whisper of another bubble, another life, another mind, and maybe, just maybe, they felt you too.